It was the morning of my 18th birthday. I bought a cake with money I saved from odd jobs. The kids at the orphanage wanted to celebrate with me. After today, I'd have to leave the only home I ever knew. When I got back, there was a police car parked outside. I didn't think much of it. I walked in, called out for Director Wong, the woman who raised me. But instead of the kids running to greet me, two officers stepped out with handcuffs. They said I was connected to a hit and run. I told them that was impossible. I didn't even own a bicycle, let alone a car. They cuffed me anyway. I set the cake down on the ground and told Director Wong to share it with the children. I said I'd be back soon. She looked at me with pity and told me to confess if I really did something wrong. That's when I knew something was very off. At the station, they showed me a blurry photo from a security camera, a red sports car, smashed up, with a young man inside. The man looked like me. Then they showed me a signed document, something called a family recognition statement, between me and a man named Shan. It said he'd given me an 8 million yuan sports car. They even had a blood report linking me to the crash. I had never heard of Shan. I had never signed anything. I had never touched that car. Then he walked in, a middle-aged man in a suit. The moment I saw his face, something stirred in me. He looked familiar, though I'd never met him. He said, "I'm Shan. I'm your father." Everything clicked. The forged documents, the fake evidence, the dormitory manager lying about me not being in my bed that night. He had arranged all of it. He told me plainly, my younger half-brother, Yuan, had been accepted into a prestigious martial arts academy. He couldn't let the boy go to prison, so he needed me to take the fall instead. He promised money when I got out. He said it like he was doing me a favor. I screamed at him. He abandoned me 18 years ago, and now the first thing he does is send me to prison. He didn't even flinch. He just said, "If you weren't my son, I wouldn't have bothered coming to see you at all." Then he walked out. He hadn't even used my real blood. He just had someone swap the lab report. A month later, I stood in court. The judge sentenced me to 15 years for vehicular manslaughter and fleeing the scene. I didn't fight it. There was no point. Every piece of evidence had been manufactured against me. In the gallery, my so-called father sat with a blank face. Next to him, Yuan, the brother I was sacrificing my life for, glanced up from his phone and smiled at me. Not a kind smile. A smile full of contempt. 2 months later, a prison transport brought me to Haicheng First Prison. The moment my feet touched the ground, I heard a strange mechanical voice inside my head. Compatible host detected. Binding in progress. Martial Dao self-improvement system successfully bound. I paused for just a second. Then I followed the guard through the iron gate. When I arrived at the prison, they stripped me down, checked everything, gave me a uniform and toiletries. I moved through it all like a zombie. 3 months had passed since my arrest. 3 months in a detention center where I thought about appealing 1,000 times. But every piece of evidence against me was perfectly forged. I had no chance of winning, so I gave up. The only thing keeping me going was the system that had appeared in my head. It was called the Martial Dao Self-Improvement System. From what I could tell, it would make me stronger automatically once I started practicing martial arts. But that was the problem. Where was I supposed to learn martial arts inside a prison? About 100 years ago, a special energy appeared on our planet, Blue Star. People who practiced ancient martial arts suddenly became incredibly powerful. That's how the martial Dao era began. But even after all this time, martial arts belonged to the rich. Big families hoarded the resources, and ordinary people like me could only dream. The one way in was getting accepted to a martial arts academy. Exactly what my half-brother Yuan had done, the reason I was rotting in here instead of him. I clenched my fists and told myself, fine, I'll wait 15 years. I'll train after I get out. As long as I hold on to that fire inside me, I can survive this. When they called my number to assign me a cell, there was a problem. No beds left. Some prisoners had been transferred over from another facility. The warden told them to put me in cell no. 1 is a temporary fix. The guard assigning beds looked nervous about it. He muttered that cell no. 1 hadn't housed anyone new in a long time and that I might not survive in there. But the warden didn't care. Cell number 1 was at the very back of the block. When I walked in, I saw the usual setup, 4 bunk beds, 8 spots. But only 3 people were inside, which was strange for a prison that was supposedly overcrowded. I greeted them politely. Nobody answered. Bed 1, an old man with white hair, lying down, ignoring me completely. Bed 2, A middle-aged man with a black eye patch, sitting up, also ignoring me. Bed 3. Another old man with a long scar running from his eye to the corner of his mouth. The scarred old man at least glanced at me, but that was it. I went to my assigned bed, number 8, right next to the toilet, just like in the detention center, and started reading the prison rulebook. Then a shadow fell over me. The scarred old man was standing right in front of me. Kid, you're just an ordinary person. How'd you end up in this cell? What did you do? I told him the truth. I didn't do anything. I was framed. He smiled, and the scar on his face twisted like a centipede crawling across his skin. He said whoever framed me must have serious connections to pull it off. I told him it was the Yi family, one of the top 10 families in Haicheng. He knew the name. He asked if it was Yi Haipeng, the family's patriarch. I shook my head and said it was Yi Jinshan, his son. The old man laughed and called Yi Jinshan a waste. Then he leaned in closer and asked me a question that made my heart pound. Do you want revenge? I looked up. Of course I do, but then I dropped my head again. I can't take on the Yi family. He laughed loudly. He said the Yi family was nothing. Yi Haipeng was only at the peak of the postnatal realm. If I could break through to the innate realm, destroying the Yi family would be easy. I didn't even know what those terms meant. Postnatal? Innate? He was talking about martial arts cultivation levels. My eyes lit up. He was offering to teach me. Become my disciple, he said. I'll help you reach the innate realm, and then you can go out there and crush the Yi family. What do you say? Before I could answer, the man with the eye patch cut in with a cold laugh. He called the old man a fraud, said the old man himself was only at the upper postnatal level and had no business promising to help anyone reach innate. The scarred old man's face went dark. He told the eye patch man to watch his mouth. The eye patch man stood up, cracked his neck, and stared him down. You think you can make me? The two men, the scarred old man and the eye patch guy, were about to fight. The pressure coming off them made my skin crawl. But before anything happened, the old man on bed 1 spoke without even moving. If you three don't shut up, I'll chop you up and feed you to the dogs. His voice was calm, almost bored. But both of them went quiet instantly and sat back down. That told me everything I needed to know. The man on bed 1 was the strongest person in this cell by far. So I did something crazy. I walked straight up to his bed and bowed. I asked him to take me as his student. My heart was pounding. I waited. One word came back. Get lost. A wave of invisible pressure slammed into me. I could barely breathe. I stepped back, disappointed, and sat down on my own bed. The scarred old man, Hu Lianfeng, as I'd soon learn, gave me a thumbs up. He told me the old man on bed 1, Elder Qin, would never accept a disciple. Then he made his pitch again. He said that at 18 with 0 martial arts training, I was a late starter, but he had a technique that could work for me. Within a few years, I could reach the postnatal realm. That wouldn't be enough to fight the Yi family's patriarch, but it would be more than enough to crush Yi Jinshan. Something felt off about his generosity. A stranger doesn't just hand you power for nothing, but I had no other options. Elder Qin wouldn't even look at me, and the eye patch man wasn't offering. So I agreed. I knelt down the way people do in old TV dramas and called him master. Hu Lianfeng laughed and accepted me. He explained the basics of martial cultivation. There are 4 major realms: body tempering, postnatal, innate, and grandmaster. Each realm has 4 stages: entry, minor achievement, major achievement, and peak. I needed to start with body tempering, which meant forging my muscles, bones, and skin until they were hard as iron. He said he'd teach me something called the Myriad Tribulations body forging technique. It didn't require heavy physical training. Instead, I would draw spiritual energy into my body through breathing, and it would refine me from the inside. But first, he needed to plant a furnace seed in my body to open up my energy channels. The eye patch man let out another cold snort. I noticed it. There was mockery in it, not just annoyance. I paused and asked Hu Lianfeng directly. What did he want from me in return? His eyes narrowed. His voice turned ice cold. Once you reach the minor achievement stage of the postnatal realm, I need you to kill someone for me. I asked the obvious question. If he couldn't handle this person at major achievement, how was I supposed to do it at minor achievement? He said the problem wasn't strength. He couldn't do it because he could never leave prison. But I could, once my sentence was up. He wouldn't tell me who the target was. Not yet. Not until I reached the right level. I held out my hand anyway. I needed this. He grabbed my wrist and pushed something into my body. It hurt. I could feel a round lump travel up my arm, over my shoulder, and down into my lower abdomen before it settled. He seemed impressed that my energy channels weren't blocked despite my age. Then he recited the technique. It was short, just a few hundred words, but dense and hard to understand. The moment he finished, the system in my head chimed. "Congratulations, host. You have comprehended the Northern Darkness divine art." I froze. He called it the Myriad Tribulations body forging technique. My system called it the Northern Darkness divine art. Those were two completely different things. I pretended I hadn't memorized it yet. No normal beginner would catch it on the first listen, and asked him to repeat it. While he recited it again, I wasn't listening anymore. I was reading the system's description of what I'd actually learned. The Northern Darkness divine art could do more than just train my body. It could absorb other people's martial energy. But there were two restrictions. I couldn't absorb anyone stronger than me, and the person I absorbed from had to also be practicing the Northern Darkness divine art. If they practiced a different technique, both our energy systems would be destroyed. Then I remembered the eye patch man's mocking snort, and everything clicked. There was no free lunch. Hu Lianfeng wasn't being kind. He was teaching me this technique so that one day, when I grew strong enough, he could drain my power like a battery. I was being groomed as a human furnace. I kept my suspicions to myself. When Hu Lianfeng asked if I had questions, I just said some parts were hard to understand. He told me the technique was top tier, capable of taking someone all the way to the Grandmaster realm, so of course it would be difficult for a beginner. He made me listen to it 8 times before he got tired and went back to his bed. The eye patch man spoke up, mocking Hu Lianfeng for reciting the entire technique out loud. Wasn't he worried about someone stealing it? Hu Lianfeng shot back that if the eye patch man wanted to learn, he could call him master. They almost started arguing again, but the old man on bed one shifted slightly, and both of them shut up immediately. Sitting on my bed, I pieced it all together. Hu Lianfeng's story about training me to kill someone after I got out. That was probably a lie. His real goal was to fatten me up like livestock, then drain my power using the absorption ability of the Northern Darkness divine art. Without the system revealing the technique's true nature, I never would have figured it out. But here was the thing. The absorption worked both ways. If he practiced the same technique, I could theoretically absorb his power too. I decided to wait and see. If he really tried to use me as a furnace, I'd turn the tables. But if he was sincere, I wouldn't betray him. He did teach me, after all. I turned my attention to the system panel in my mind. It was simple, a translucent blue screen with 3 lines. Host, Yiwu Dao. Realm, Mortal, 0/1000. Technique, Northern Darkness divine art. Not yet learned, 0/1000. No buttons. No menus. Nothing to click. I stared at it for a few minutes and got frustrated. Is this thing useless? I muttered in my head. What's the point of learning this technique if the system does nothing? The moment I thought that, notifications popped up on the panel. The technique felt insulted by my words. It started training on its own. Proficiency went up by 10. Then it noticed I was old and had average talent, so it decided it could only rely on itself. Proficiency went up by 20 more. Then it decided it didn't want to be dragged down by me and pushed even harder. Another 30 points. I was stunned. This was the self-improvement system. It wasn't about me getting stronger. The technique itself had feelings and would train on its own if I provoked it. I tested it. That's all you've got, I thought. The technique felt humiliated and trained harder. 10 more points. I was right. The key was to keep provoking it. But then I wondered, shouldn't self-improvement mean it trains automatically without me having to poke at it? I tried a different approach. Can't you just train on your own? You're supposed to be self-improving. It worked. The technique awakened a will of its own and began auto-training. 10 proficiency points per minute, plus 1 realm experience point per minute. Completely passive. I didn't have to do anything. Excited, I pushed harder. You're still not strong enough. Get stronger. Bad move. The technique overexerted itself and entered a cultivation deviation state, frozen for 24 hours. I panicked for a second, then tried something softer. It's okay. Take your time. We'll get stronger together. The deviation cleared instantly. The technique felt encouraged and resumed auto-training, now at 20 points per minute and 2 experience per minute. Even faster than before. Now I understood exactly how this system worked. It wasn't about brute forcing motivation. I had to balance insults with encouragement. Too much pressure, and the technique would break down. A little kindness at the right moment, and it would bounce back stronger. Basically, I had to master the art of emotional manipulation on my own martial arts technique. At this rate, the technique would reach the entry level in under an hour. Reaching the entry stage of body tempering would take about 10 hours. Not bad at all. I sat on my bed and pretended to meditate. Meanwhile, my technique was doing all the real work on its own. On bed 3, Hu Lianfeng watched me with a cold little smile on his face. I watched the proficiency numbers climb on my system panel. All I could think about was the day I'd get out and make Yi Jinshan and Yi Mingyuan pay for what they did to me. After 50 minutes, the Northern Darkness Divine Art hit 900 proficiency. I started to worry. Reaching entry level in under an hour would look suspicious. I tried telling the technique to stop and rest, that it was already strong enough. It refused. The system told me the technique felt insulted by the suggestion and declared that nobody could stop it from getting stronger. I could only sit there and watch the numbers climb. 920, 940, 960, my heart was racing. This was my first time cultivating, my first time breaking through any kind of barrier. At 1000, something happened. A warm current appeared in my lower abdomen. The furnace seed Hu Lianfeng had planted. It started pulsing. Energy wrapped around my whole body. My muscles twitched and stretched on their own. My heart pounded hard. My joints crackled and popped. That sound gave me away. Hu Lianfeng shot up from his bed, staring at me in disbelief. Technique entry. Body cleansing, he whispered. The eye patch man looked equally shocked. Even the old man on bed one opened his eyes for a moment before closing them again. It felt like thousands of ants crawling under my skin, tingly and strange, but not painful, almost pleasant. It lasted about 30 seconds. The system confirmed it. Technique entry achieved, plus a bonus 100 realm experience points. Better yet, the auto-training speed doubled. Proficiency was now climbing at 40 per minute, realm experience at 4 per minute. At this rate, I'd reach the body tempering realm in just a few hours. The problem was speed. Hu Lianfeng had said even talented people take about a year to reach major achievement in body tempering. I was about to hit milestones in hours. If he noticed, he might get suspicious. Or worse, try to drain me early. I'd have to be careful. When I opened my eyes, both Hu Lianfeng and the eye patch man were staring at me. I played dumb and asked my master why my body had felt itchy. He smiled and pointed at me. I looked down. My prison uniform was soaked through, and a horrible sour smell hit my nose. Under my clothes, my skin was covered in a layer of thick black gunk, slippery and sticky like lard. Hu Lianfeng explained it was toxins being pushed out of my body. It meant the technique was working. He told me to go wash up because the smell was unbearable in our small cell. I asked if we were even allowed to shower at this hour. In the detention center, showers were only on odd-numbered days, 10 minutes max, in a shared washroom. Hu Lianfeng just pointed at our toilet area and said this cell had its own rules. When I walked into the bathroom, I froze. This was a prison bathroom. It had a proper shower, a bathtub, both a squat toilet and a sitting toilet, wet and dry separation, nicer than most hotel bathrooms. After 3 months of washing in a concrete trough at the detention center, this felt like paradise. There was even brand-name shampoo and body wash on the shelf. I took my time, a full 30 minutes, the most comfortable shower I'd had in months. When I came out, I asked Hu Lianfeng if all the prison bathrooms were this nice. He rolled his eyes and explained that cell no. One was special. It was reserved exclusively for martial artists at the postnatal realm or above. We didn't have to follow the normal prison rules. The food was better, the supplies were better, and we could do mostly whatever we wanted. But there was a catch. He said there were downsides to living in this cell too. When I asked what they were, he wouldn't say, just told me I'd find out tonight. He said to eat, rest up, and be ready. Tonight there might be some kind of action, and he was going to show me what the real world of martial arts looked like. By 5:30, I was starving. Cultivation had drained me. My stomach felt completely hollow. In the detention center, meals were basic. 2 steamed buns for breakfast, 1 meat dish and 1 vegetable for lunch, and cabbage or potatoes for dinner. I was expecting more of the same. Then a guard rolled in a 3-tiered cart loaded with food. Braised pork knuckle, steamed chicken, roast lamb ribs, braised pork belly, steamed fish, Nothing but meat. Not a single vegetable. Not even rice. The guard called out to the three of them, then looked at me and told me to follow him to the regular cafeteria. I stood up, a little disappointed. But Hu Lianfeng stopped him. He said I was eating here from now on and told the guard to bring an extra portion. The guard tried to push back, saying I was just an ordinary person and couldn't have the same treatment as the martial artists. Hu Lianfeng's eyes narrowed and his voice dropped cold. He said he'd taken me as his disciple, and if the guard had a problem with it, he could bring the warden over to discuss it. Then he threatened to tear the prison apart if his own dinner didn't show up. The guard practically ran out the door. He didn't even lock it behind him. Hu Lianfeng handed me a plate with a whole braised pork knuckle and told me to eat. He said my body needed a lot of meat now that I'd started cultivating. He told me to never go hungry. It would hurt my progress, and to just tell him whenever I needed more food. For a second, my eyes stung. He was being so kind. I wondered if I'd been wrong about him. Maybe he really was just a good teacher and I'd been unfair. But then I thought about it again. Of course he wanted me well fed. A stronger body meant more power for him to drain later, if that was really his plan. I decided to stay on guard. I'd know the truth when I reached minor achievement in the postnatal realm. If he turned out to be genuine, then I'd be proud to call him master for real. I asked if it was okay for me to eat the whole knuckle while the others hadn't eaten yet. Hu Lianfeng said Elder Qin on bed one didn't eat ordinary food anymore. The eye-patch man, whose name turned out to be Zhang Hanquang, shrugged and said he didn't mind. A kid who just started cultivating needed the nutrition. Then Zhang Hanquang's tone shifted. He warned Hu Lianfeng, if he was planning to take me to the rift tonight, he'd better protect me properly. He said not to come crying for help if things went wrong. Hu Lianfeng brushed him off and said he could handle it. I didn't know what the rift was, but it didn't sound good. A few minutes later, the guard came back with another cart of food, all for me. He whispered something to Hu Lianfeng. The warden wanted to know if I'd also be going to the rift to kill monsters, since I was now getting Selno. One privileges. Hu Lianfeng confirmed it and reminded the guard that the reward system applied too. Killing monsters meant a shorter sentence. That part got my attention. Killing monsters could reduce my 15 years? I had 1,000 questions. What was the rift? What were these monsters? But Hu Lianfeng told me to wait until tonight, when I'd see it for myself. He said he'd teach me a fighting technique after I rested, so I'd at least be able to defend myself down there. I kept eating. One pork knuckle didn't even dent my hunger. I grabbed a bowl of braised pork belly and shoveled it down. My body was burning through everything. Now I truly understood the old saying, literature is cheap, martial arts is expensive. If a normal family tried to feed a martial artist, they'd go broke on groceries alone. After the pork knuckle, I ate a whole steamed chicken, a fish, and a pound of beef. Zhang Hanquang watched me with raised eyebrows and said I was a good candidate for martial arts. Anyone who could eat that much had the right foundation. He mentioned that when he first started training, he ate just as much, but only had steamed buns and rice. The lack of proper nutrition back then had slowed his progress. He believed if he'd eaten better, he might have already broken through to the innate realm. Hu Lianfeng scoffed at that. He said innate-level warriors in all of Haicheng could be counted on 2 hands, and reminded Zhang Hanquang how long he'd been stuck at peak postnatal. That hit a nerve. Zhang Hanquang rolled his eyes and stopped talking. I noticed that despite their constant bickering, the two of them never actually fought. They saved their real energy for what they called the rift. I lay on my bed, full for the first time in months, watching my system numbers climb. An hour later, Hu Lianfeng woke me up. It was time to learn a fighting technique. He dropped into a low stance, legs bent, body solid as a mountain, and began demonstrating 8 extremes fist. He told me it was an ancient killing art. No fancy moves, no wasted motion. The core idea was simple. When you punch, your whole body punches with you. Every strike he threw made a small explosive sound in the air. It was raw and brutal. Zhang Hanquang watched from his bed and clapped sarcastically. He said the 8 extremes fist was fine for beating up ordinary people, but useless against real monsters. Then he stood up and said he'd teach me something better. Without any warm-up or stance, he lunged forward 1 step and threw a single punch. The impact shook the air. He called it the mountain collapse fist. One move, that's all it was, but that one move was devastating. He said in the early stages of martial arts, you don't need 100 techniques. You just need one punch that can kill. Hu Lianfeng was furious. He argued that the mountain collapse fist was a postnatal level technique, far too advanced for someone who hadn't even reached body tempering yet. My body was too fragile to handle the recoil. He insisted that 8 Extremes fist was the right choice. It trained the body, built a solid foundation, and included both offense and defense. Zhang Hanquang fired back. What good was a balanced approach if you couldn't kill your enemy before they killed you? While they argued, I checked my system panel. Both techniques had already been recorded. A new row had appeared under my technique list, martial skills. 8 Extremes fist needed 1,000 proficiency to reach entry level. Mountain collapse fist needed 10,000. The tenfold difference told me everything. The mountain collapse fist was clearly on another level. Then Elder Qin spoke up. He sat upright for the first time since I'd arrived. His voice cut through the argument instantly. He said they were both right. 8 Extremes fist was a good foundation builder, and mountain collapse fist had real killing power even at lower levels. His verdict: learn both. Then he looked at me and said I had 30 minutes to get familiar with both techniques. After that, we were going into the rift. He told Hu Lianfeng to keep an eye on me. Hu Lianfeng asked if I'd understood the demonstrations. I said yes to both. He looked surprised. I'd made a decision. There was no point hiding my talent anymore. My technique was already training itself nonstop, and I couldn't turn it off even if I wanted to. Better to let all 3 of them think I was a martial arts prodigy. If Hu Lianfeng believed I was genuinely gifted, he might think twice before trying to drain me. And if Elder Qin took an interest in me, maybe he'd step in if things ever went south. Hu Lianfeng studied me for a moment, then smiled. Seems I got lucky picking you up, he said. I smiled and said nothing to Hu Lianfeng's comment about being lucky. I couldn't tell if he meant lucky to find a talented student or lucky to find a good battery to drain. I turned my attention inward and started working on the 2 new martial skills. I tried the same approach I'd used on the Northern Darkness divine art, comparing them to it, shaming them into action. 8 Extremes fist, mountain collapse fist. Can't you 2 learn from the Northern Darkness divine art? It's been working hard since it got here, and you 2 just sit around doing nothing. Both techniques responded to the provocation and started training. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of just training quietly like the Northern Darkness divine art did, both techniques left my body to go find opponents on their own. The system said they'd decided to improve through real combat and had departed to seek out enemies. Then the notifications started rolling in. 8 Extremes fist encountered a first-tier monster and fought it. 50 bonus proficiency points. Mountain collapse fist did the same. The messages kept coming, one after another. I was stunned. The martial skills were fundamentally different from the cultivation technique. The Northern Darkness divine art stayed inside me and trained passively, raising my realm. The fighting techniques went out into the world, picked fights with monsters, and leveled up through battle experience. And the combat knowledge they gained fed directly back into my brain. I could feel new instincts appearing, timing, angles, reflexes I'd never had before, as if the experience was being printed into my memory. I must have been grinning like an idiot, because Zhang Hanquang snapped me out of it. Kid, practicing martial skills isn't like meditating. Get moving. I made an excuse about needing time to digest what I'd been taught. That triggered another argument between the 2 of them. Hu Lianfeng told Zhang Hanquang to mind his own business. Zhang Hanquang fired back, and this time he said something that confirmed my worst suspicion. You know exactly what the Northern Darkness divine art does, old man. Hu Lianfeng's eyes narrowed. Are you trying to interfere? Don't forget the rules of the martial world. Zhang Hanquang glanced at me, then at Hu Lianfeng, and shook his head. Fine. It's between you and your disciple. None of my business. Now I knew for certain. Hu Lianfeng was planning to use me as a furnace. Zhang Hanquang had known from the start. That's what all those cold snorts had been about. He thought it was a waste because I actually had talent, but the rules said he couldn't interfere between a master and his disciple. I looked over at Elder Qin, sitting on bed 1 with his eyes closed. He was my only real hope. If anyone could stop Hu Lianfeng, it was him. I decided to test the waters and asked Hu Lianfeng what his argument with Zhang Hanquang had been about. He brushed it off as an old grudge and told me not to worry about anything except training. I didn't push it. I wasn't strong enough to confront him yet. I got up and ran through the 8 Extremes fist. 1 full set, and my whole body felt light and energized. Then I tried the mountain collapse fist. It was harder, my body strained with the force, but I managed to generate a gust of wind with my punch. Zhang Hanquang's eye lit up when he saw it, but then he looked at Hu Lianfeng and just shook his head with a sigh. Both of them were surprised. I'd only seen each technique demonstrated once, and I could already perform them with decent form. Hu Lianfeng even noticed something experienced in the way I threw the 8 extremes fist. He didn't know it was because the technique itself was out fighting monsters and feeding me real combat data. Then Elder Qin stood up. He checked the clock on the wall and said 3 words. Time's up. Let's go. Everyone fell in line. I stood behind Hu Lianfeng. Zhang Hanquang followed Elder Qin. Before we left, Elder Qin looked at me and told me to stay close to my master and not wander off. Hu Lianfeng's expression flickered for just a second when Elder Qin said that. Something dark behind his eyes, but it vanished the moment Elder Qin looked his way. Elder Qin walked to the cell door and placed his hand lightly on the handle. The door swung open on its own. No key, no guard. The padlock, which hung on the outside, had somehow been removed from this side of the door. I stared in shock. If he could do that, this cell had never been his prison. He could leave whenever he wanted. So why was he here? What could possibly keep a man this powerful locked up voluntarily? Elder Qin led us out of the cell and down the corridor. It was 8 at night. Every other prisoner was locked up. But we walked freely through the halls like we owned the place. When we reached the main security gate, Elder Qin stepped up to a facial recognition scanner. It beeped, said, "Authentication successful," and the electromagnetic lock released. The heavy iron door swung open. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A prisoner, opening the prison's security doors with his own face. Registered in the system. Authorized. I whispered to Hu Lianfeng and asked why we were still in prison if we could walk out whenever we wanted. He chuckled and explained that the prison walls weren't what kept them here. People were. Powerful martial artists on the outside enforced the sentences. Anyone who tried to escape would be found dead on the street the next day. The only way out was to earn it through merit. That's what the rift was for. He explained it to me as we walked. After spiritual energy appeared on Blue Star, cracks in space started showing up. Rifts leading into another dimension filled with monsters called demon beasts. Our job was to go in and kill them, keeping them from invading our world. For every first-tier beast killed, 1 day was shaved off your sentence. Second-tier beasts meant 2 days, and so on. With my 15-year sentence, if I killed 1 first-tier beast per day, I could be out in about 7 years. I asked if first-tier beasts were easy to kill. Hu Lianfeng shook his head. He said even the weakest unranked beasts were beyond me right now. First-tier beasts matched up against body-tempering cultivators, and not weak ones either. Most first-tier beasts could fight someone at major achievement in body tempering. The stronger ones required a postnatal warrior. Hu Lianfeng himself, at major achievement postnatal, only dared hunt first-tier beasts. He wouldn't risk fighting second-tier ones. Zhang Hanquang called that out from the driver's seat, saying Hu Lianfeng's problem was his weak combat techniques, not his realm. A normal postnatal warrior could handle second-tier beasts. Hu Lianfeng shot back by asking if Zhang Hanquang would dare fight a ground-splitter beast, the king among second-tier monsters. Zhang Hanquang went quiet after that. Outside the prison building, guard towers lined the high walls. The sentries on duty saw us and immediately looked the other way, pretending we didn't exist. A black van was parked at the entrance. Zhang Hanquang got behind the wheel. Hu Lianfeng told me to sit in the back. I hesitated. The back seat should be for the senior members, but Elder Qin told everyone to stop wasting time, so I climbed in. Zhang Hanquang floored it. The force pinned me to my seat, and before I knew it, we'd driven straight out through the prison gates without anyone stopping us. On the road, I asked Hu Lianfeng why he'd said he could never get out if killing beasts reduced sentences. Zhang Hanquang answered for him. He told me my master had wiped out an entire small family, over 30 people, and received a life sentence. Even without a death penalty in the Federation, his crimes would have earned him death hundreds of times over. He still had over 900 years left on his sentence. Even killing 10 second-tier beasts daily for the rest of his life wouldn't be enough. Zhang Hanquang wasn't much better off. He'd killed 8 people avenging his wife, and still had over 300 years to serve. I asked why they still bothered risking their lives in the rift if they could never earn their freedom. Hu Lianfeng said killing beasts also earned points that could be traded for cultivation resources. If he could break through to the innate realm, maybe, just maybe, there'd be another way out. He glanced at Elder Qin as he said it, then went silent. I looked at Elder Qin too. If Hu Lianfeng thought reaching innate would change things, and Elder Qin was clearly far above everyone else in this cell, then Elder Qin had to be at the innate realm already. Maybe higher. Nobody spoke after that. The mood in the car turned heavy. We drove all the way to the coast. When the van finally stopped, I looked out the window at the endless ocean stretching to the horizon. Where was the rift? I didn't see anything. We got out of the van at a deserted beach. Elder Qin led us into the mountains along the coast, same formation as before, him in front, then Zhang Hanquang, then Hu Lianfeng, and me at the back. Deep in the forest, armed soldiers in full tactical gear suddenly surrounded us. One of them pointed a rifle at us and demanded to know who we were. Elder Qin answered calmly, "First prison, Qin Tianlong, leading a team into the rift." That was the first time I heard his full name. Qin Tianlong, it suited him. They asked for a passcode. He gave it. The soldiers vanished back into the trees so fast I couldn't even tell where they'd hidden. We pushed deeper into the forest. The pace kept getting faster, and with all the thorns and undergrowth, I was burning through energy. I'd entered the martial path, but my body was still that of an ordinary person. I hadn't reached body tempering yet. I started falling behind. Hu Lianfeng noticed, grabbed the back of my collar, and suddenly I felt light as a feather, practically flying through the trees. After a few more minutes, the forest opened up onto a cliff overlooking the sea. Everyone ahead of me jumped off without hesitation. First Elder Qin, then Zhang Hanquang, then Hu Lianfeng. I walked to the edge and looked down. It wasn't a bottomless drop. Below me was a massive black gash in the air itself, about the size of a freight truck. Tiny cracks splintered out around it, and a ball of purple light glowed at its center. This was the rift. I clenched my teeth and jumped. Wind screamed past my ears. The crack swallowed me whole. A violent dizziness hit me, and my body started spinning, pulled by some invisible force. Then it stopped. I opened my eyes to darkness. We were standing on an open grassland. It looked a lot like Blue Star, except there was no moon, just pitch blackness, with the faint glow of a camp about 100 meters away. Elder Qin said we'd go to the outpost first to get weapons, then head to a canyon. I followed, asking Hu Lianfeng questions along the way. He explained that the landing zone was always random within about 100 meters of the camp, and they kept the outpost at a distance to avoid people crashing into each other or landing on someone's weapon. The area around the camp had been cleared of monsters long ago, with daily patrols keeping it safe. I noticed the security here was lighter than on the Blue Star side. Hu Lianfeng said that made sense. The heavy defenses back on the cliff were to stop civilians from stumbling in and to prevent monsters from crossing over to our world. Here in the rift, everyone who came through was a fighter. The guards only needed to check that you weren't a monster. The camp was lined with tents on both sides of a wide road. People carrying all kinds of weapons moved between them. Elder Qin and Zhang Hanquang kept walking ahead, but Hu Lianfeng stopped and told me we needed to take a detour. He said I had to register as a demon slayer, an official identity for operating in the Rift world. Without it, any monsters I killed wouldn't count toward my sentence reduction, and I couldn't borrow weapons from the armory. He told me the Demon Slayer title was more than just a pass. The more beasts you killed and the more honor you earned, the higher your status became. Top-ranked Demon Slayers stood above the entire Blue Star Federation. That's why the prison guards treated the men in Cell No one with respect. We were prisoners, yes, but we were also Demon Slayers serving on the front line. And if someone killed enough monsters, they could have their criminal record erased, get a new identity, even become a Federation senator. All they needed was the strength to earn it. I followed Hu Lianfeng toward a gray tent on the left side of the road. Inside a gray tent, a young man in a blue uniform handled registrations. Hu Lianfeng told me to give my name and ID number. The worker typed it into his computer, then looked up at me with surprise. "You're an ordinary person?" Hu Lianfeng stepped in and said I was his disciple and he'd be bringing me along. He pulled out a silver medal from his pocket, his Demon Slayer badge. The worker scanned it and confirmed, silver-ranked Demon Slayer, postnatal major achievement. Qualified to bring someone along for beast hunting. But he warned us to stay away from the canyon, where second-tier beasts roamed. Hu Lianfeng mentioned our team also had a gold-ranked Demon Slayer. The worker let it go after that. He pulled a black badge from a drawer, scanned it into the system, and placed it on the table. Congratulations, Yiwu. You are now a Black Iron Demon Slayer. He explained the rules. 1 point per first-tier beast, 2 for second-tier, and so on. 10,000 points to upgrade to bronze rank. Since I was a prisoner with 15 years left, I needed 5,475 points to clear my sentence entirely. The badge had a built-in recorder. Every kill would be logged automatically. No badge, no rewards. I clipped the black badge to my chest. Over 5,000 first-tier beasts, or about half that in second-tier. Not a small number. Outside the tent, I asked Hu Lianfeng about his situation. He sighed. In 6 years at the prison, he'd earned just over 40,000 points. Not even enough for gold rank yet. At his pace, freedom was still 50 years away, and he probably wouldn't live that long. His only real hope was breaking through to the innate realm to extend his lifespan. I asked about Elder Qin. Hu Lianfeng said he couldn't share details. If Elder Qin wanted me to know, he'd tell me himself. All he'd say was that Elder Qin's sentence was more than double his and Zhang Hanquang's combined. But Elder Qin killed beasts fast, and he was close to reaching gold rank. That meant he had somewhere around 8 or 900,000 points. Even with that, he still hadn't served enough. I couldn't imagine what crime could carry a sentence that enormous. Zhang Hanquang, on the other hand, had only been here 6 months. But at peak postnatal, he could kill about 22nd-tier beasts a day. He already had around 8,000 points. At that rate, he'd be free in about 10 years. Hu Lianfeng mentioned that cell number 1 used to have more people. Some earned their release, others died in the rift. We stopped at a large tent, the armory. Hu Lianfeng told me to wait outside. Renting even the cheapest weapon cost 1 point, and I had 0. He went in and came back carrying a large saber. I asked him why nobody used guns. It seemed obvious. Even monsters were flesh and blood, so bullets should work. He laughed and told me to look around. I scanned the camp. He was right. Not a single person carried a firearm except the tower guards. He explained that gunfire attracted monsters. The rift was home to thousands upon thousands of beasts. 1 gunshot would bring a swarm. The Federation had tried firearms when the rift was first discovered. The casualties were devastating. Since then, only cold weapons, blades, spears, fists. The tower guards had guns strictly for camp defense, not for hunting. I followed him through the camp, toward wherever Elder Qin and Zhang Hanquang were waiting. Past the camp was a wide parking lot filled with hundreds of vehicles. Elder Qin stood waiting with a long spear in hand. Zhang Hanquang held a curved blade. Hu Lianfeng had his saber. They loaded the weapons into the trunk. It wouldn't close, so they left it open, and we piled into a gray van. Hu Lianfeng grabbed a tablet from the glove box and started calling out directions while Zhang Hanquang drove. Now I understood why Hu Lianfeng had made me sit in the back on Blue Star. This was their routine. Zhang Hanquang drove. Hu Lianfeng navigated and watched for danger, and Elder Qin sat in the back as the team's anchor, eyes closed, ready for anything. While we drove, a notification chimed in my head. The 8 Extremes fist had reached entry level, only an hour after I'd learned it. The combat experience from the technique fighting monsters on its own had sped things up. The moment it broke through, a flood of deeper understanding poured into my brain, like a grandmaster was personally teaching me the art's secrets. I checked my panel. Realm experience was at 450. The Northern Darkness Divine Art had 2,500 proficiency in its entry stage. In about 3 hours, I'd break into the body-tempering realm, and the Divine Art would reach minor achievement. The speed was exciting but terrifying. 3 veteran martial artists were sitting right next to me, and if they figured out something unnatural was happening, things could go very wrong. I accidentally let out a sigh. Hu Lianfeng heard it and asked what was wrong. I covered by saying I was thinking about what Yi Jinshan did to me. That led to a conversation I hadn't expected. When I told them I was Yi Jinshan's illegitimate son, the whole car went quiet for a second. Even Elder Qin opened his eyes to glance at me. Zhang Hanquang asked why my own father would frame me. I explained everything. How Yi Mingyuan killed someone in a hit-and run, how they used my resemblance to him, how they forged every piece of evidence. Zhang Hanquang said it was disgusting, but Hu Lianfeng added context I'd never known. He said Yi Haipeng, the family patriarch, had always looked down on Yi Jinshan for being useless. To secure the family's future, He'd arranged a marriage between Yi Jinshan and the third daughter of the Li family. The Li family's head, Li Yaozu, was an innate-level martial artist. The marriage was basically Yi Haiping attaching his weak family to a powerful one. And Yi Jinshan was completely controlled by his wife. Zhang Hanquang connected the dots. He said the whole scheme to frame me probably came from Yi Jinshan's wife, the Li family woman. Yi Jinshan, being the coward he was, would never have risked exposing an illegitimate son on his own. His wife must have found out about me and decided to use me as a disposable tool. Then Zhang Hanquang said something that hit hard. "Kid, this grudge of yours is going to be tough to settle." He explained that taking revenge didn't just mean fighting the Yi family. It meant going up against the Li family too, and the Li family had an innate level master at its head. Even reaching innate entry level might not be enough. I'd probably need minor achievement in the innate realm to have any real chance. He laughed when I mentioned reaching innate myself, saying if it were that easy, he wouldn't still be stuck at peak postnatal in his 40s. I looked straight ahead and said, "As long as I'm alive, I will settle this debt." The car went silent. Elder Qin raised an eyebrow and glanced at me, but said nothing. We drove for a few more minutes before Zhang Hanquang hit the brakes. Hu Lianfeng said we had to walk the rest of the way. Engine noise and headlights would set off the monsters in the canyon ahead. All three grabbed their weapons from the trunk. Elder Qin told me to follow behind and stay at the top of the slope overlooking the canyon. Under no circumstances was I to go down. Then he launched forward like an arrow. His feet cracked the ground where he pushed off. Zhang Hanquang followed just as fast. Hu Lianfeng gave me one last look and sprinted after them. Their speed was terrifying. They moved as fast as cars on a highway. I stared at the footprints they'd left behind, deep imprints with cracks radiating outward, and then ran after them as fast as I could. A minute or two later, I heard it. Shouts, battle cries, and animal roars echoing from below. When I reached the edge, I stopped. They'd called it a slope, but it was practically a vertical cliff with the slightest angle to it. I couldn't have climbed down even if I tried. Below, massive floodlights lit up the canyon floor. Dozens of human fighters with melee weapons were locked in combat with beasts, creatures I'd never seen before. Some looked like wolves, but bigger than tigers. Others resembled sheep with long, sharp horns. There were boar-like things covered in thick armor plates, and stranger creatures I couldn't even describe. None of them were the half-human monsters I'd imagined from games. They were animals, just unnaturally large and vicious. I couldn't spot Hu Lianfeng or Zhang Hanquang in the chaos. Too many fighters with blades. But I found Elder Qin immediately. He was the only one with a spear, and he wasn't fighting alongside the other humans. He'd charged straight into a pack of monsters alone. Over a dozen beasts surrounded him, but none could get close. His spear was a blur, thrusting, sweeping, stabbing, and every few seconds another beast dropped dead. He leaped 7 or 8 meters into the air at one point. I noticed a white glow coating his spear tip. I remembered what Hu Lianfeng had taught me. Body tempering refines the body, postnatal refines force, innate refines energy. That glow had to be qi, the power of the innate realm. I stood there watching, completely mesmerized. Then a rough voice behind me said, "Hey kid, what are you doing standing here?" I spun around. For people were walking toward me. 3 middle-aged men and 1 older woman, all carrying the same style of broadsword. My stomach dropped. Hu Lianfeng had warned me about people carrying matching weapons in the rift. They meant a clan or a sect, and those groups wouldn't hesitate to kill. I told them I was waiting for my master. They asked who my master was. I said Hu Lianfeng, hoping the name would scare them off. It did the opposite. The lead man's eyes narrowed. Then he laughed, a cold, ugly laugh. Hu Lianfeng? That dog. His disciple. He told me Hu Lianfeng had murdered his junior martial brother and stolen their sects. The 4-blade sects, secret sword manual. They'd wanted revenge for years, but weren't strong enough to challenge Hu Lianfeng directly. And now here I was, his student, alone and defenseless. He called it a gift from heaven and said he'd kill me as an offering to his dead brother. I cursed my luck. I dropped Hu Lianfeng's name to protect myself, and it had painted a target on my back instead. These 4 were probably around minor achievement postnatal at best. Too weak to fight Hu Lianfeng, but more than enough to kill someone like me. There was only one option. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "I'll fight you." And the moment they expected me to charge, I turned around and sprinted straight toward the cliff's edge, heading down into the canyon full of monsters. I knew I couldn't fight those four people, and I couldn't outrun them either. Even the weakest martial artist was faster than an ordinary person like me. My only chance was to get down into the canyon, where Hu Lianfeng and the others would see me. I ran for the slope. The second my foot hit the edge, I lost control completely. The angle was practically vertical. I flipped forward and tumbled, slamming into rock and dirt over and over. The world spun. Pain exploded everywhere. Then everything went black. I found out later what happened while I was unconscious. The Four-Blade sect didn't chase me. Their leader, the old woman, told them a normal person falling from that height would die for certain, and they couldn't risk Hu Lianfeng catching them. So they disappeared into the night. My fall drew attention from the fighters below. Hu Lianfeng spotted the prison uniform rolling down the cliff and immediately broke away from the armored boar he was fighting. He shouted my name and charged toward the slope. Elder Qin reacted even faster. He stomped the ground, launched himself into the air, then somehow kicked off nothing and flew across more than 100 meters to catch me at the bottom. When Elder Qin checked my body, the damage was bad. I'd lost consciousness, had multiple broken bones, torn blood vessels, and several damaged energy channels. He placed his palm on my back and poured white mist, his qi, into me. I woke up to pain. Every part of me hurt so badly I could barely speak. I told Hu Lianfeng what happened. The Four-Blade sect, their grudge against him, how they'd cornered me. His face went dark with rage, and he gripped his saber, ready to go hunt them down. Elder Qin shut him down with one sentence. You made the enemies. Your disciple paid the price. That's how it works. He said my injuries would take 2 or 3 months to heal, and told Hu Lianfeng and Zhang Hanquang to carry me back to the camp's medical tent. Zhang Hanquang picked me up carefully and bounded up the nearly vertical slope like it was a staircase. As they carried me away, I didn't hear what Elder Qin said to Hu Lianfeng privately, but I learned about it much later. Elder Qin had told him plainly that he knew Hu Lianfeng planned to use me as a furnace to drain my cultivation. He pointed out that even if it worked, Hu Lianfeng would only rise from major achievement to peak postnatal, which still wasn't enough to leave prison or take revenge on anyone. Elder Qin suggested a different path. Let me grow. My talent was real. If I got strong enough, I could carry out Hu Lianfeng's revenge for him instead. He also warned Hu Lianfeng that I probably already knew what the Northern Darkness divine art could do. Hu Lianfeng didn't answer right away. He told Elder Qin he'd think about it carefully, then came to check on me. Elder Qin watched him go, shook his head, and murmured something about twisted fate. Then he turned back toward the monster horde. He had his own revenge waiting on the outside, and at his pace, he'd be free in 2 or 3 years. He couldn't afford to waste a single night. I lay on a hospital bed in the camp's treatment room while a doctor worked on me for 2 hours. The damage: 3 cracked ribs, 1 broken leg bone, 2 broken hand bones, and scrapes everywhere, some deep enough to show raw flesh underneath. They set the bones, wrapped me in plaster, and bandaged me head to toe until I looked like a mummy. The doctor told Hu Lianfeng I couldn't leave bed for 2 months and couldn't practice any fighting techniques. But I could use internal cultivation to speed up healing. Hu Lianfeng sent Zhang Hanquang back to hunt monsters while he pushed my bed out of the camp toward the return portal. I asked where we were going, and he explained that the way back to Blue Star was different from the way in. It was a separate rift near a small pond on the outskirts of the camp. I asked why the camp wasn't built right next to the rift. He said the spatial crack was unstable. It would shrink and expand unpredictably, sometimes growing large enough to swallow everything nearby. Keeping the camp at a distance was a safety measure, both against the rift itself and against monster attacks. Along the way, I peppered him with more questions. I'd seen other prisoners fighting in the canyon and wanted to know why we hadn't run into them leaving the prison. He explained that Haiqing had over 10 prisons, and most had cells like ours for martial artists. Cell number 1 at our prison had a privilege. We departed at 8, an hour before everyone else. The other prisoners from our prison were only at body tempering level, so they hunted in safer areas, not the canyon where second-tier beasts roamed. I asked why we only came at night. He said during the day, the monsters left their nesting grounds to hunt for food, spreading out everywhere. Far too dangerous. At night, the giant floodlights in the canyon tricked the beasts into thinking it was daytime. drawing them to one location so hunters could fight them efficiently. I asked why we bothered killing them at all if we could just keep them from invading Blue Star. Hu Lianfeng laughed. Monster meat strengthened a person's blood and energy. Their hides and bones could be refined into medicine. The Rift World also contained rare spiritual herbs that aided cultivation. The Federation wasn't pouring resources into this out of charity. There was enormous profit in it. But even so, humanity had explored less than 1/10,000th of the Rift World. Our area was the very edge, the safest zone. He told me that a group of Grandmaster-level warriors had once tried to push deeper into the Rift, and they came back with 2 dead and 8 wounded. Grandmasters, the strongest warriors on Blue Star, nearly wiped out just trying to go further in. This world was far more terrifying than I'd imagined. I asked about the monster meat and medicines. He said everything was tightly controlled. You could buy them with points or access them through martial arts academies. The Federation was investing heavily in developing martial talent, and anyone with real potential got recruited into an academy. If I got out of prison early, I could enroll. Academies had cultivation resources, techniques, and skills, all much easier to obtain than grinding for points in the Rift. I remembered Yi Jinshan telling me that Yi Mingyuan had been accepted into a martial arts academy. That was the whole reason I was in prison, to protect his future. Martial arts academy, I whispered to myself. When I got out, I'd go there. Not as a substitute for someone else's crime, but on my own terms. Hu Lianfeng pushed my bed along a path built across the pond and straight into the return rift. The familiar dizziness hit me as the world spun. I was going back to Blue Star. My first trip to the Rift World had been a disaster. But even wrapped in bandages and plaster, lying flat on a hospital bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: curiosity and hunger for more. I took one last look at the dark world behind me and promised myself, once I healed, I was coming back. When we came through the rift back to Blue Star, we landed on the wrong side of the beach, far from where we'd parked. Hu Lianfeng tried pushing my hospital bed across the sand, but the small wheels sank immediately. He sighed, picked me up in his arms, and started walking. He moved fast but steady. I barely felt any bouncing. Moonlight broke through the clouds and lit us both in silver. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. I stared up at the sky and thought about everything that had happened. Then he asked me a question that made my blood run cold. Do you know what the Northern Darkness divine art really does? I froze. Had I given myself away? I didn't think so. But before I could decide whether to lie, he continued. He said the later lines of the technique were pretty obvious. Once I'd reached entry level and could actually comprehend the words, it would be strange if I hadn't figured it out. He told me to just say it openly. Even if I knew the truth, he wasn't going to make a move on me right now. So I told him. I recited the key passages about absorbing another person's internal energy and storing it in your own body like the vast northern sea. And the warnings: never absorb from someone stronger, and never absorb from someone practicing a different technique, or both systems would collapse and destroy your meridians. I told him that the moment I read those warnings, I understood what he'd planned for me. My mother once told me that nobody is kind to a stranger for no reason. He was quiet for a moment, then laughed. He said he was impressed. Those warning lines were buried inside the technique's verses, and when he'd first learned the art himself, he hadn't understood them at all until his own master explained. He said Elder Qin was right about me having real potential. That's when it clicked. Elder Qin had spoken to him privately after I was carried away. Hu Lianfeng got straight to the point. He said Elder Qin had told him to make his own decision, so he was asking me directly. I told him the truth too. I was grateful that he taught me, but I had a vendetta to carry out. If he tried to use me as a furnace, I wouldn't just accept it. He nodded. Then he laid everything bare. He admitted he'd originally planned to drain me once I hit minor achievement postnatal. But Elder Qin had made him see that even if he succeeded, he'd only reach peak postnatal. Not enough to escape prison, not enough to get revenge. He was already over 70 years old, and a postnatal warrior could only live to about 100. He'd never make it out. So he'd changed his mind. Instead of draining me, he wanted me to carry his revenge. His real enemy wasn't some minor achievement nobody. That had been a lie. His true target was the Zhang family, the most powerful clan in all of Haiqing. Years ago, after breaking through to major achievement postnatal, he'd accidentally offended a man named Zhang Yuanlin. In retaliation, Zhang Yuanlin slaughtered Hu Lianfeng's entire family, 6 people. To strike back, Hu Lianfeng killed 30 members of Zhang Yuanlin's wife's family. Then he turned himself in. Prison was the only place the Zhang family couldn't reach him, because the prison system was tied to the Rift World and watched over by Grandmaster-level warriors. Zhang Yuanlin himself was only minor achievement postnatal, weak. The real threat was his father, Zhang Jianya, a major achievement innate warrior. In all of Haiqing, only the Demon Slayer commander outranked him. Everyone else stepped aside when Zhang Jianya walked by. Then Hu Lianfeng told me something about Elder Qin that changed how I saw everything. Elder Qin, Qin Tianlong, had also been put in prison by Zhang Jianya. Qin Tianlong used to be the leader of the Green Dragon Gang, the biggest faction in Haiqing. He was a minor achievement innate warrior, powerful enough to do whatever he wanted in the city. But Zhang Jianya broke through to major achievement innate first and crushed him, destroying the gang's entire foundation. Hu Lianfeng said that if I could win Elder Qin's real support, not just his passing interest, then there was genuine hope for revenge. But right now, Elder Qin was only mildly curious about me. Getting him truly invested would take far more than what I'd shown so far. I was stunned. Elder Qin and Hu Lianfeng shared the same enemy, the Zhang family, the most powerful clan in Haiqing, led by Zhang Jianya, a major achievement innate warrior. If even Elder Qin at minor achievement innate had been crushed by this man, how was I supposed to fight him? Hu Lianfeng saw my silence and asked if I was scared. He said it was fine if I backed off. We talked honestly, and he wouldn't hold anything against me. He'd settle for me just killing Zhang Yuanlin someday, if I ever got the chance. I told him I wasn't scared. I was calculating how many years it would take me to reach major achievement innate. He laughed. I promised him I'd live up to it, and told him to stay alive long enough to hear the good news. He pointed out that my enemy list was getting long. The Yi family, the Li family, and now the Zhang family. 3 of the top 10 clans in Haiqing. He told me not to feel pressured and to take it one step at a time. I agreed, but inside I felt confident. I had the system. It was only a matter of time. Something shifted between us after that conversation. The wall of suspicion was gone. I could feel it. A weight lifted off both of us. For the rest of the drive, he talked and I listened. He taught me about the major sects and factions in the martial world, including the Four-Blade sect that had almost gotten me killed. Their strongest member was that old woman, the sect leader, and she was only at entry postnatal, not even a real threat. The whole feud started because Hu Lianfeng had paid one of their members $2 million for their secret technique. The man took the money and refused to hand over the manual, so Hu Lianfeng killed him and took it. That's how grudges worked in the martial world: money, blood, and stolen techniques. I made a mental note. Once I got out of prison, the Four-Blade sect would be first on my list. He also told me about the Demon Slayer commanders. Not one person, but a group of Grandmaster-level warriors who rotated between cities each year, guarding the rifts. Spatial cracks were appearing all over Blue Star and increasing every year, which was why the Federation was pushing martial arts development so hard. He'd heard that 10 Grandmasters had once ventured deep into the Rift world and encountered monsters far beyond their level. That encounter might have revealed humanity's existence to whatever lived in there. If those creatures ever decided to invade Blue Star, it would be a catastrophe. I asked what lay beyond the Grandmaster realm. He wasn't sure. He'd only seen a reference in an old text to something called Martial Dao Golden Core, but didn't know if that was the actual name. We made it back to prison around 10. The rift was only open from 8 at night to 6 in the morning, so there was no point in Hu Lianfeng going back out. He stayed in the cell with me. Lying in bed, wrapped in bandages, I opened my system panel. In the hour plus since I'd last checked, the Northern Darkness Divine Art had gained another 3,500 proficiency points, and my realm experience was at 790, almost ready to break into body tempering. 8 Extremes Fist was at 1,800 proficiency. Mountain Collapse Fist was lagging behind at only 1,900. Time for some motivation. Mountain Collapse Fist, you're falling behind, I thought. It worked. The technique got fired up and boosted to 20 points per minute. Then I turned to 8 Extremes Fist, the only one I hadn't fully pushed yet. 8 Extremes Fist, look at Mountain Collapse Fist. It hasn't even reached entry level, and it's already catching up to you. The technique surged to 40 points per minute, and immediately picked a fight with a first-tier monster for an extra 50 points. Now all 3 of my arts had been stimulated twice, the maximum safe limit. Push any of them a 3rd time, and they'd enter that dangerous deviation state, like the Northern Darkness Divine art almost had before. Knowing when to stop was just as important as knowing when to push. I'd learned my lesson. Less than an hour later, it happened. My realm experience hit 1,000. A warm current surged from my lower abdomen and spread through my entire body. My muscles started trembling, not randomly, but in a steady rhythm. My heart pounded like it wanted to break through my chest. Then my skin flushed hot, and sweat soaked through the bandages in seconds. Underneath the wrappings, my wounds itched intensely, and I could feel something growing where the bones had cracked, like they were knitting themselves back together. I started panting, trying to cool down. Hu Lianfeng heard me and jumped out of bed, rushing over. He thought my injuries had gotten worse. But after watching me for a few seconds, he froze. "You're breaking through to body tempering." He recognized the signs, the muscle tremors, the sweating, the heat. He'd gone through it himself decades ago. What threw him off was that I was doing it lying on my back, wrapped in bandages. He grabbed the gauze around my chest and tore it open, felt my heartbeat, and confirmed it. I was really advancing. He stood there in shock. From the moment he'd taught me the Northern Darkness Divine art to right now, barely 4 hours had passed. It had taken him a full month to make the same breakthrough. The most talented genius he'd ever encountered still needed 3 days. I'd done it in a fraction of that time. When the heat faded and I opened my eyes, the first thing I did was lift my left arm, the one with the worst fracture. Hours ago, I couldn't move it at all. Now I raised it with only mild soreness. I looked down at my torn bandages. The deep scrapes that had been raw and bloody were already scabbed over. The broken ribs didn't hurt anymore. My right shin and left forearm still ached, but the pain was a fraction of what it had been. Hu Lianfeng asked if I'd felt anything special during cultivation. I shook my head. He sat down on the bed next to mine and told me something I hadn't known. He said that in the martial world, there were legends of people born with something called a sacred martial body, a constitution that made cultivation as easy as breathing. These people could accomplish in minutes what took ordinary practitioners years. The fastest genius he'd ever met took 3 days to reach body tempering. I'd done it in 3 hours. He asked if I might have this sacred martial body. I almost laughed. It wasn't some special body. It was my system doing all the work while I lay there. But this was actually perfect. If everyone believed I had a legendary constitution, then no matter how fast I progressed, it would seem natural. So I played along. I told him I didn't feel anything unusual, just that after I understood the technique, warm energy would flow through my body on its own, like it was cultivating automatically. I described exactly what the system did, just using different words. Let him fill in the blanks with whatever explanation made sense to him. Hu Lianfeng grabbed my wrist to check for himself. He went still. He could feel it. A thin current of energy flowing through my meridians on its own, without me meditating or doing anything at all. Normally, internal energy only moved during active cultivation. The rest of the time it sat dormant in the dantian. What was happening inside me broke every rule he knew. He asked when it started. I played dumb and said it had been like that ever since he taught me the technique. He stared at me, muttering about the legendary sacred martial body, a mythical constitution that made cultivation effortless. He told me he'd need Elder Qin to examine me when he got back, since Elder Qin had far more experience. About 30 minutes later, the Northern Darkness Divine Art hit minor achievement. The notification told me proficiency had jumped to 80 points per minute and realm experience to 8 per minute. A massive wave of warm energy surged through my body, much thicker and more powerful than before. When it settled back into my dantian, the feeling was so pleasant I accidentally let out a groan. Hu Lianfeng heard it and turned around. He saw wisps of energy leaking from my skin, a sign he recognized immediately. It was what happened when the Northern Darkness Divine Art broke through to minor achievement and the meridians couldn't fully contain the stronger energy yet. Minor achievement. Already, he whispered. 5 hours. That's all it had taken from learning the technique to reaching minor achievement. He'd spent half his life cultivating and had only reached major achievement. I could see in his eyes that something inside him was breaking, his pride, maybe, or his understanding of what was possible. He asked if my martial skills also trained on their own. I decided to commit fully to the genius act, so I nodded and told him I'd occasionally feel new combat insights appearing in my mind, like the techniques were practicing by themselves. He wanted me to demonstrate the 8 extremes fist right then, but caught himself when he noticed my casts. He told me to rest instead. Then he looked up at the ceiling and started talking to his dead master, asking if this was some kind of divine intervention. I told him I was tired and needed to sleep. It had been the longest day of my life. Transferred to prison, awakened the system, taken as a disciple, entered the rift world, nearly died falling off a cliff, and broken through to body tempering, all in one day. I closed my eyes and was out instantly. I woke to Hu Lianfeng's voice calling my name. 3 faces hovered over me. Hu Lianfeng looked anxious. Zhang Hanquang looked fascinated. Elder Qin had his hand on my wrist, brow furrowed. Strange. Very strange, Elder Qin murmured. Even in his sleep, his technique keeps running. His body is being continuously strengthened by internal energy. I've never encountered anything like this in all my years. Hu Lianfeng asked urgently if I had the sacred martial body. Elder Qin shook his head. He said he'd never actually seen one. The sacred martial body only existed in ancient texts and legends. Those records described someone who learned techniques easily and cultivated faster than normal, but nothing about techniques running on their own. What I had was something he'd never heard of, let alone seen. He asked me if I felt any discomfort from the cultivation process. I said no. I felt perfectly fine. He studied me for a long moment, then patted Hu Lianfeng on the shoulder. Old Hu, you really did pick up a treasure. I don't know what exactly his condition is, but compared to him, the sacred martial body is nothing. A technique that cultivates itself automatically. I've never even heard of such a thing. The world truly is full of wonders. I lay there quietly celebrating. All 3 of them believed my abilities came from some rare physical constitution. My cover as a martial genius was solid. Zhang Hanquang sighed and said it was a shame such a talented seedling had ended up with Hu Lianfeng. That triggered the usual bickering. Hu Lianfeng boasting about his sect background, Zhang Hanquang pointing out he'd only been an unofficial disciple. Elder Qin cut them both off and said they could both teach me if they wanted. With the speed I was learning, his real concern was whether they'd even have enough to teach. Then Zhang Hanquang looked at me and asked if I'd mind taking a second master. I glanced at Hu Lianfeng, who shrugged and said it was my choice. He explained that in the modern martial world, having multiple teachers was common. Martial arts academies taught students from many different traditions at once, and the grandmaster level leaders were pushing to make martial arts universal. Sect exclusivity was fading. Zhang Hanquang waved off the formalities. No kneeling, just call him master. He said he wanted to see how far I could grow. He offered to teach me a technique called the limitless art, which he said was just as powerful as the Northern Darkness divine art. Hu Lianfeng and Zhang Hanquang immediately started arguing about who should be called first master and who should be second master. In the middle of their squabbling, Zhang Hanquang accidentally suggested that if Elder Qin also took me as a disciple, he'd end up being third master. The room went dead silent. Zhang Hanquang realized what he'd said and started apologizing, but Elder Qin just smiled. He said the comment actually made him want to take me on. He wasn't interested in titles. He simply wanted to see how far someone with my kind of talent could go. Then he said something that made the whole room hold its breath. Perhaps even beyond Grandmaster is not impossible. He asked me directly if I'd accept him as my master. I was stunned. Just that morning he'd told me to get lost. Now he was offering. I bowed my hands together immediately. Disciple greets his first master. Elder Qin sorted out the hierarchy by age. He'd be first master, Hu Lianfeng second, Zhang Hanquang third. Nobody argued. Zhang Hanquang wanted to teach me his limitless art right away, but Hu Lianfeng raised a problem. The Northern Darkness divine art couldn't be practiced alongside other techniques. The energies would clash and cause a dangerous cultivation deviation. Zhang Hanquang countered that his limitless art could take someone all the way to major achievement Grandmaster, while the Northern Darkness divine art only reached entry Grandmaster without the advanced continuation manual that Hu Lianfeng didn't possess. Elder Qin stepped in. He said his own technique also only reached major achievement Grandmaster. The truly top-tier manuals that went higher were locked away with the Demon Slayer organization and hidden sects. accessible only after reaching the Grandmaster realm. And the compatibility problem was real. Most techniques conflicted with each other. Then he paused and said he had something special, a technique both of them would recognize. Zhang Hanquang figured it out first. You mean the primordial chaos art? Hu Lianfeng's eyes went wide. He said the primordial chaos art was famous. It had caused a sensation when it first surfaced, but every person who tried to cultivate it had failed. It was considered a theoretical text, impossible to actually practice. Its only function was to fuse different techniques into one, and it had no cultivation power of its own. Elder Qin nodded. Others can't cultivate it. That doesn't mean he can't. He explained that if I could make the primordial chaos artwork, he had plenty of techniques for me to fuse together. And if that succeeded, breaking past the Grandmaster ceiling might actually be within reach. I didn't understand all the technical details, but I understood the key word, fusion. My system made techniques train themselves automatically. Each additional technique meant faster overall progress. A method that let me practice multiple techniques without them tearing each other apart was exactly what I needed. I looked at Elder Qin and said, "First Master, I think it's worth trying." Both Hu Lianfeng and Zhang Hanquang turned to me with concern when I said I'd try it. Zhang Hanquang explained that the primordial chaos art had been discovered in an unnamed Taoist temple decades ago. Countless people had tried to cultivate it since then. Every single one had failed. Some went mad from cultivation deviation. Most just wasted years of their lives on something that never worked. Hu Lianfeng agreed. Even with my unusual talent, the technique was suspicious. I looked to Elder Qin for his take. He acknowledged their worries were valid but laid out the bigger picture. He said many Grandmaster-level warriors were currently researching this art, believing that the barrier to reaching beyond Grandmaster wasn't talent, but the lack of a suitable technique. Some people were trying to use the primordial chaos art to fuse existing techniques together, while others were trying to create entirely new ones from scratch. Neither approach had succeeded yet. He personally believed the primordial chaos art had the best chance. Nobody in the current era had managed to create new techniques. Whatever conditions allowed ancient martial artists to produce so many methods simply didn't exist anymore. If I could make it work, it wouldn't just benefit me. It could change everything for the entire martial world. He'd seen the rift. He knew that against the truly powerful monsters deeper inside, even Grandmasters were helpless. Humanity needed to break through that ceiling. He told me he wanted to open a path to whatever lay beyond Grandmaster. Whether I walked that path was my choice. I didn't hesitate. I'll learn it. My reasoning was simple. If the system could absorb and register the technique, it would work. If not, I'd drop it without wasting any time. Elder Qin began reciting the verses. The moment he finished, 2 system notifications appeared. The first said I'd comprehended a special technique, the primordial chaos art. It had no proficiency meter. Instead, it could fuse any 2 techniques that had both been cultivated to the perfection stage. The second notification said I'd unlocked a special state called primordial chaos state, which allowed me to cultivate 2 different techniques simultaneously without them conflicting. I stared at the messages. The requirements were steep. Both techniques needed to reach perfection before they could merge, and normally, cultivating 2 techniques at once would cause increasingly violent internal conflict as they grew stronger. Past minor achievement, the risk of deviation became extreme. But the primordial chaos state bypassed all of that. It let 2 techniques coexist inside my body without interfering with each other. And because the system had comprehended it automatically, I'd unlocked the state instantly, something that Elder Qin's own father had spent 30 years trying and failing to achieve. I opened my eyes. All 3 of them were staring at me anxiously. I told them the truth, or at least my version of it. I said the technique required entering a special state I called primordial chaos state, where 2 different techniques could run independently inside the body without clashing. I'd entered that state, and I believed that once I cultivated 2 techniques to perfection, I could fuse them. Hu Lianfeng and Zhang Hanquang looked confused. They'd never heard of such a state. But Elder Qin's face went pale with shock. He said my description matched his father's theory exactly. His father had spent over 30 years studying the primordial chaos art and concluded it was actually a Taoist technique, not a martial one. The creator was likely a cultivator of the Tao who had experimented with martial arts. His father believed that whoever created the art might never have successfully practiced it themselves. He died without solving it, but his final words were that anyone who mastered it would reach a level unprecedented in history, a fusion of Tao and martial arts. I smiled bitterly and said it sounded like Elder Chin hadn't expected me to succeed at all. He shook his head. He'd held some hope because of my unique talent, but decades of failure by everyone else had kept his expectations low. Then he turned to Zhang Hanquang and told him to teach me the limitless art right away. He wanted to see the primordial chaos state in action. Zhang Hanquang nodded and began reciting. The limitless, without limit. The body is trained without end. Force is refined without conclusion. Zhang Hanquang started reciting the limitless art twice, worried I wouldn't remember it. But the system had already absorbed it on the first pass. I got straight to work motivating it. Limitless art. You're new here, but you should learn from your senior, the Northern Darkness divine art. The technique responded. It awakened its self-improvement will and started auto-training at 10 proficiency per minute. I pushed again, telling it that since it was technically a higher-grade technique, it shouldn't fall behind. It doubled to 20 per minute. Then something unexpected happened. The Northern Darkness divine art sensed a rival had appeared and pushed itself harder. Its training speed jumped to 160 proficiency per minute, double what it had been. Having two techniques competing against each other was making both of them faster. I checked my full system panel. My realm was body tempering entry at 2,600 out of 10,000. The Northern Darkness divine art was at minor achievement with 24,000 out of 100,000. The limitless art was brand new at 120 out of 1,000. And while I'd been sleeping, 8 Extremes Fist had quietly reached minor achievement and Mountain Collapse Fist had reached entry, both still out fighting monsters on their own. When Zhang Hanquang asked if I'd memorized the technique, I closed the panel and pretended to start meditating. I had to keep up the act. Seconds later, I felt a hand on my wrist. Elder Chin, checking my energy flow. I could feel it too. 2 separate currents of warmth running through different meridian pathways inside my body. One strong, one faint. Where their routes overlapped, the 2 streams would pass one after the other, never colliding, as if they had minds of their own. Elder Chin pulled his hand back looking stunned. He asked if I was controlling the 2 energy flows myself. I told him no, they were running on their own, guided by some force that kept them from clashing. He said he could clearly sense both streams simultaneously refining my body without any interference. In the martial world, some people practice 2 techniques, but they always alternated, never running both at the same time, because 2 different types of internal energy colliding inside the body could shatter your meridians or kill you outright. That had been an unbreakable rule for as long as martial arts existed. And I'd just broken it. He calculated that at my current rate, I'd reach minor achievement in body tempering within 7 or 8 hours. From ordinary person to body tempering entry in 4 hours, and from entry to minor achievement in under a day. He said he'd never heard of anything like it in his entire life. Hu Lianfeng almost choked. Zhang Hanquang went silent. He'd once been proud that his master called him a 1 in 100 talent. He'd reached body tempering entry in 7 days and minor achievement in 3 months. I was on track to do it all in a single day. He figured my talent was at least 100 times greater than his. Elder Chin gave instructions to the other 2. During the day, they'd teach me every martial skill they had. At night, we'd continue going to the rift as usual. No new techniques for now. 2 was probably my limit until I could fuse them through the primordial chaos art. Once Hu Lianfeng and Zhang Hanquang had taught me everything they could, Elder Chin would take over. By the time my injuries healed, I should be near major achievement in body tempering, strong enough to hunt monsters in the rift. He looked at me and said something I carved into my memory. In the martial world, strength is all that matters. But high cultivation doesn't always mean true strength. Real warriors are forged through battle. Then my stomach growled so loudly all 3 of them heard it. I asked sheepishly if there was any food available at this hour. Hu Lianfeng smiled, pressed a button by the door, and minutes later a guard wheeled in a 3-tiered cart packed with meat, just like dinner. Hu Lianfeng pushed it to my bedside and said it was all mine. I didn't need to be told twice. By noon the next day, I reached minor achievement in body tempering. The familiar symptoms came: heat, sweat, and another round of black toxins seeping out, though less than the first time. Elder Chin said the second purge was triggered by the limitless art adding its own refining energy. The limitless art also hit entry level at the same time, doubling its training speed. At this rate, with both techniques feeding me about 20 realm experience per minute, I'd reach major achievement in body tempering within 16 hours. Hu Lianfeng asked about my injuries. I moved around carefully and realized I was mostly fine. 2 realm breakthroughs in one night had healed what should have taken 100 days. Each time I leveled up, excess energy automatically repaired damaged tissue and bone. That's why stronger warriors lived longer. Their bodies were constantly being renewed. Hu Lianfeng said since I was healed, he'd start teaching me martial skills immediately. I jumped out of bed. Then he wrinkled his nose and told me to shower first. Fair enough. Between last night's sweat-soaked bandages and this morning's toxin purge, I smelled terrible. After I cleaned up, Hu Lianfeng was waiting with a large saber. He said since I'd been attacked by the Four-Blade sect, he'd teach me their own signature technique, the deathly 4 slashes, so I could use it against them next time. His first lesson in the ways of the martial world: always repay grudges 10 times over. That's how you make sure nobody dares cross you. He demonstrated the technique. 4 strikes, each targeting a lethal weak point. Simple, brutal, designed purely for killing. I watched it once and told him I understood. He looked surprised but moved on to his main combat style, the 4 Seasons Blade, a postnatal level saber art with flowing movements that chained together endlessly. After one demonstration, I said I'd learned it. He didn't believe me and told me to show him. I took the saber and replicated the forms. They weren't polished yet, but the structure was all there. He stared at me and suddenly got suspicious. When he taught me the Northern Darkness divine art, it took 8 repetitions before I said I'd memorized it. Now I was learning techniques in a single viewing. Had I been messing with him before? I blamed it on the primordial chaos art. I said everything became easier after I comprehended it. He couldn't verify that, since nobody else could practice it, so he accepted the explanation. He decided to pour everything he had into me in one day. Over the next 2 hours, he taught me the meteor fist, heart-crushing palm, swimming dragon steps, and a hidden weapon technique called soul-chasing dart. His skills were mostly body tempering level with a few postnatal techniques. The 4 Seasons Blade was his main combat art. I demonstrated every single one back to him without missing a move. When it was over, he just stood there, looking both proud and hollow. He'd spent decades collecting those techniques, suffering and fighting for each one. I'd absorbed his entire life's work in 2 hours, and my system would eventually push each technique to perfection, a level he himself hadn't reached with some of them. Zhang Hanquang watched from his bed, shaking his head. When Hu Lianfeng sat down looking drained, Zhang Hanquang stood up and said it was his turn. He specialized in a different style of blade, the Tang sword, lighter and faster than Hu Lianfeng's heavy saber, better for duels. He taught me the silk weaving blade, smoke steps, 8 trigrams palm, and bone-crushing fist, plus the mountain collapse fist he'd already shown me. His techniques were all postnatal level, more complex and harder to learn. But I still picked up each one after a single demonstration. An hour later, he had nothing left to teach either. Elder Chin stood up and said I was the strangest freak he'd ever met. He warned me that if the Demon Slayer organization ever found out how I trained, they'd probably cut me open to study me. He said martial skills were usually about quality over quantity. A person's energy was limited. But since my techniques trained themselves, none of those rules applied to me. He held up a wooden stick and told me he'd teach me his main weapon art, the Overlord Spear, a legendary technique passed down from an ancient warlord thousands of years ago. It was pure aggression, every move pushed forward, never retreating. When he demonstrated it, the wooden stick in his hand felt like a real spear. Decades of practice had made him and the weapon one entity. The system registered it as an innate level technique requiring 100,000 proficiency just to reach entry. 10 times what a postnatal skill needed. After the spear, Elder Chin taught me 8 more postnatal techniques: chain cannon fist, tiger subduing fist, sky splitting palm, diamond palm, horse cleaving saber, 6 harmony spear, 1,000-pound drop, and phantom steps. By the end, my system panel held 21 martial skills in total. I'd provoked each one twice, setting them all to auto-train. I did the math. A postnatal technique would take about a month and a half to reach perfection. Body tempering skills would take about 5 days. Innate skills like the Overlord Spear would take around 10 months. For context, Elder Chin had practiced the Overlord Spear his entire life and still hadn't reached perfection. As for my 2 cultivation techniques, they'd both reach perfection in roughly 5 days. Once they did, they'd generate enough realm experience to push me into the postnatal realm. 5 days from ordinary person to postnatal, a number that would stun the entire martial world. That night, all 3 masters went to the rift, leaving me alone. I started practicing techniques manually for the first time and discovered something new. When I physically performed 8 extremes fist, the system registered it as personal encouragement. The technique's training speed doubled. After 10 repetitions, it doubled again. After 100, it doubled once more. Each tenfold increase in my effort triggered another boost. Better yet, this method didn't cause the dangerous deviation state that verbal provocation risked at high levels. I could combine both approaches, practice the technique myself, then taunt it verbally, and the boost stacked without limit. By the time 8 extremes fist hit major achievement, it was gaining 1,280 proficiency per minute. At that speed, it would reach perfection in 13 hours. All my earlier projections were wrong. Everything would happen much faster. Then I tried the same approach on the Northern Darkness Divine Art. I sat down and ran through its cultivation cycle for the first time manually. The system responded positively at first, but then hit a wall. Technique incomplete. Cannot increase training efficiency further. Please complete the technique. I was confused. Incomplete? I tried the Limitless Art next. It responded normally. Each milestone of personal practice boosted its speed, up to 160 per minute. But after 100 cycles, it hit the same ceiling with the same message, incomplete. Both techniques maxed out at 160 per minute from personal effort. I remembered what I'd been told. The Northern Darkness Divine Art could only reach Entry Grandmaster, and the Limitless Art could only reach Major Achievement Grandmaster. Elder Chin had said the reason nobody could break past the Grandmaster realm was because all existing techniques were fundamentally incomplete. These were ancient martial arts passed down for generations, yet none of them were whole. I couldn't figure out why, and eventually stopped trying. Maybe the answer would come when I reached the Grandmaster level myself. For now, I focused on what worked. My martial skills were all complete, and their training speed could be pushed upward without any cap. I spent the rest of the night drilling every technique I'd learned, watching the numbers climb. I spent the entire night practicing every technique I'd learned, running each one 100 times. That was the sweet spot. After 100 repetitions, the next boost required 1,000, which wasn't worth the time right now. Some simple techniques took a minute or 2 per cycle. The complex ones took 7 or 8 minutes. By the time my 3 masters returned at dawn, I still hadn't finished half of them. But the big news was that I'd broken through to major achievement in body tempering. Both cultivation techniques had been running all night at 160 proficiency per minute each, generating a combined 170,000 proficiency and 17,000 realm experience in 9 hours. Zhang Hanquang was first through the door and froze on the spot. He stared at me practicing 8 trigrams palm, dripping with sweat. He asked why I was training manually when my techniques did it automatically. I told him that practicing myself seemed to boost the training speed even further. He looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Hu Lianfeng squeezed past him and asked if I was saying I could make the already insane pace even faster. I nodded. Elder Chin walked in, grabbed my wrist, and went quiet for a moment. Then he looked up. "You've reached major achievement in body tempering?" Both Hu Lianfeng and Zhang Hanquang shouted in disbelief. I confirmed. It had happened about half an hour before they got back. Elder Chin just shook his head and said normal logic didn't apply to me. My auto-running techniques were constantly repairing my body while I trained, and the breakthrough energy from leveling up had healed whatever fatigue remained. A normal person training all night like that would have collapsed. But since my body was being reinforced every second, there were no consequences. Zhang Hanquang asked how fast I was really progressing with 2 techniques running simultaneously. I told him honestly, about 3 more days to reach the postnatal realm. He sat down on his bed looking defeated. He'd spent 3 years getting from body tempering to postnatal. I'd been cultivating for 2 days total. Hu Lianfeng said he'd taken 8 years. They started bickering about whose talent was worse. Then both went quiet when they realized neither of them even registered compared to me. Elder Chin settled it by saying they were all ordinary people, while I might be someone who would define a new era. That seemed to make them feel better. Even he, an innate level master, couldn't compare to what I was doing. I asked if I could go to the Rift World tonight, since I'd reached major achievement. Elder Chin agreed and asked what weapon I wanted, broadsword, tang sword, or spear. I chose the broadsword. After learning all 3 weapon styles, I felt the broadsword suited monster hunting best. It was big and heavy, good for fighting groups. The tang sword was precise, but hard to maneuver in a swarm. The spear was powerful, but the overlord spear technique hadn't even reached entry level yet. Zhang Hanquang raised an eyebrow at my choice, thinking I was looking down on his tang sword. I explained my reasoning, and Elder Chin backed me up. He told Zhang Hanquang that the tang sword had a real weakness for body-tempering warriors. When the long blade hit something hard, pulling it free required enormous strength. Postnatal fighters used internal force instead of muscle, so they never noticed. But at my level, where I still relied on physical power, the heavier broadsword was actually easier to control. Then Elder Chin spent time teaching all 3 of us about weapons and martial philosophy. Before taking me as his disciple, he'd never shared this kind of knowledge with Hu Lianfeng or Zhang Hanquang. Something in him had changed. Since he was already teaching me, he figured he might as well include everyone. After a while, the cell went quiet. All 4 of us rested, saving our energy for tonight. At 8 that evening, Elder Chin opened the cell door and we headed out. By 8:30, we were through the rift. This time I wasn't scared. Elder Chin rented me a broadsword from the armory. The cold glint along the blade made my heart race. Tonight I'd finally hunt monsters and start earning points toward my freedom. Elder Chin split our group. Hu Lianfeng and Zhang Hanquang went to the canyon for second-tier beasts. Elder Chin would take me to a river area with first-tier monsters and watch over me personally. When we reached the car, I automatically went for the back seat, but Elder Chin was already there. He told me to drive. I'd never driven before. I'd gone to prison on my 18th birthday before I could even get a license. But Elder Chin talked me through it. Automatic transmission, 2 pedals, brake on the left, gas on the right. In the Rift world, there were no roads and no traffic laws, so I just pointed the car wherever he told me and drove. I started shaky, but got the hang of it quickly. The terrain was rough and full of potholes, but I was soon pushing 80 kilometers per hour. Elder Chin sat in the back, completely unbothered by the bouncing. 20 minutes later, I spotted lights ahead, the riverbank hunting ground. Elder Chin told me to stop a few hundred meters out. I grabbed the broadsword from the trunk and followed him to a gentle slope overlooking the battlefield. He put a hand on my shoulder. Time to prove yourself. Go fight. I turned on my badge recorder and charged down to the stone riverbank using smoke steps for speed. The area was packed with fighters, even more than the canyon. Hundreds of warriors battled beasts across a wide stretch of rocky ground. I scanned for a target and spotted what looked like a small deer covered in spots, like a sika deer, but with no antlers. Instead, it had 2 long fangs jutting from its mouth. It seemed weaker than everything else nearby, so I went for it. I switched from smoke steps to swimming dragon steps, better for close combat. The deer thing charged at me fast, faster than I expected. But I didn't panic. The deathly 4 slashes technique fed targeting data straight into my mind. I could see the weak points clearly. Throat, skull. First slash, straight to the throat, clean hit. Second slash, overhead chop to the skull. The creature dropped. I didn't even need the 3rd or 4th strikes. I turned around so my badge recorder could capture the body, then retreated to a safe open spot the way Elder Chin had taught me. I looked at my sword. That had been easy. Way too easy. The technique had flowed out of me like I'd been practicing it for years. The moment I decided to use the deathly 4 slashes, the optimal attack path appeared in my mind automatically. Angles, timing, how to dodge while striking. I checked the system. The deathly 4 slashes was only at major achievement, not even perfection yet. And I just killed a first-tier beast in 2 moves on my very first real fight. I didn't know it at the time, but up on the slope, Elder Chin had shot to his feet. That deer was actually called a fongmouth deer, a high-level first-tier beast that most warriors avoided. No other fighters had been anywhere near it, which should have been my clue. Elder Chin had expected me to struggle and learn a hard lesson. Instead, I dropped it in 2 strikes with the fluidity of a veteran. Now I was already eyeing my next target. A leopard-like creature, lower to the ground but longer, with razor claws extending a good 10 centimeters from its paws. Something told me this one was stronger than the deer. I wanted to test myself further. Elder Cheen watched from above, half impressed and half worried. He muttered that the creature I'd picked was a long-claw leopard, the king of first-tier beasts, something that even peak body-tempering warriors struggled against. "Kid," he said to himself, "can you handle that?" I didn't know the names of any of these beasts. Elder Cheen had deliberately left me in the dark. Learning to judge an enemy's strength by instinct was part of my training. After killing the deer thing, I turned my attention to a leopard creature nearby. It was lower to the ground, longer, with 10-centimeter claws extending from its paws. It looked tougher. I charged. It roared and leaped at me, 2 or 3 meters into the air. Most people would have tried to match it, but jumping would leave me exposed midair. Instead, I dropped into a sliding tackle underneath it. Its belly was soft and unprotected. I'd spotted that weakness the instant I saw the creature. First slash, upward into its stomach as I slid beneath it. Hot blood sprayed across my face. Second slash, I spun around and drove the blade into its rear, sinking a third of the sword inside. Third slash, I ripped the blade out and hammered the creature into the ground with a sideways swing. It didn't get up. 3 strikes, and the king of first-tier beasts was dead. I wiped the blood from my face and wondered again. Was I really this strong, or were these monsters just weak? I'd used only the deathly 4 slashes, a body-tempering technique, and hadn't even needed my postnatal level skills. Every time a beast moved, its weak points lit up in my mind automatically. I could calculate attack angles, dodge patterns, and strike timing before the creature even reached me. What I didn't realize was that Elder Cheen had shot to his feet on the slope above. He couldn't believe what he'd seen. A first-time fighter killing the strongest first-tier beast in 3 moves. He figured out the reason. I'd absorbed 21 different martial techniques, each with its own method of analyzing weak points and exploiting openings. One technique gave limited insight. 21 working together created something like battlefield omniscience. The sheer volume of combat knowledge feeding into my brain had turned me into a fighter that shouldn't have been possible at my level. He muttered to himself that he'd come to coach me through my first real fight, but there was nothing left to teach. I was already fighting above my realm. I killed another fong-mouthed deer, then started tangling with a red-eyed wild dog, the weakest first-tier beast. I was mid-fight when I noticed 4 people creeping up behind me. I finished the dog with a clean decapitation and turned around. It was them, the 4-blade sect. The same middle-aged man from last night stood 3 meters away, sword raised, grinning. He said he was surprised I'd survived the fall, and even more surprised I'd dared come back. He looked at the dead dog on the ground and laughed, assuming I'd barely managed to kill the weakest possible monster. He figured I was still at entry body tempering. The old woman, their sect leader, spoke up from behind him. She'd noticed the dead fong-mouthed deer nearby and warned him I might be stronger than he thought. But the man dismissed her. He said there was no way someone who'd fallen off a cliff yesterday could have killed a high-level first-tier beast. It must have been someone else's kill. He raised his sword at me. "Since we didn't finish you yesterday, we'll finish you today." The reason I'd been taking my time with that wild dog wasn't because I couldn't kill it. I'd been testing different footwork techniques in live combat, dodging without striking. I only finished it off when I noticed the 4-blade sect approaching. I planted my sword in the ground and stared at the middle-aged man. He taunted me, saying he'd checked the slope and hadn't seen Hu Lianfeng anywhere nearby. I smiled coldly and told him I didn't need my master to deal with trash like him. That set him off. He charged at me with his sword raised. But in my eyes, he was full of openings. Sloppy footwork, unstable base. His body swayed too much, and the hand holding his blade was shaking. I watched him close the 3-meter gap and made my move. One clean upward thrust along his torso, from his stomach to his chest, ending with the blade piercing straight through his heart. He looked down at the wound, tried to raise his sword, and couldn't. Blood spilled from his mouth. He dropped. I pulled my blade free and looked at the remaining 3. I was planning to settle this score after I got out of prison. But since you came to me, let's settle it now. People nearby started whispering. They recognized the 4-blade sect leader and were surprised someone had killed one of their members. Some assumed I was from a powerful family with hidden protectors. Others pointed out the sect leader was at entry postnatal. She'd crush a body-tempering fighter easily. The old woman screamed the dead man's name, then drew her blade and ordered the other two to surround me. One came from the left, one from the right, with the monster horde at my back. I had to break out through one side. I moved first. Hu Lianfeng always said to strike before the enemy is ready. Using smoke steps at full speed, I closed the gap on the man to my left before the sect leader could react. He threw up the deathly 4 slashes in defense, but his version was slow and clumsy. Maybe minor achievement at best. I showed him what the technique looked like at major achievement. One fluid motion, duck, swing, lift. He fell backward, dead. The sect leader screamed and slashed at my head. I sidestepped 2 meters with a single lateral shift and dodged cleanly. She called for the last man to attack together. He charged my right side. I retreated a few steps, drawing him forward, then reversed direction instantly, swimming dragon steps, the technique of retreating to advance. By the time he realized what was happening, my blade was already coming down on his skull. I didn't bother checking if he was dead. I heard the sect leader right behind me, spun around, and raised my sword to block. The impact rang through my bones. A strange force traveled down her blade into my arms. This was internal force, the power of the postnatal realm. My hands went numb, and I stumbled back 4 or 5 steps before I caught my balance. She was entry postnatal. In raw power, she outclassed me completely. I didn't know it, but Elder Qin had walked down from the slope. He'd been ready to save me, but after watching me cut down 3 body-tempering fighters in seconds, all at the same level as me, he decided to observe instead. He held a small stone between his fingers, ready to flick it if things went bad. The sect leader was shaking with rage. 3 of her people dead in under a minute. She snarled that I must be hiding some kind of secret. Yesterday, I could barely stand on a slope, and today I was killing warriors at my own level without breaking a sweat. She said once she killed me, whatever secret I had would be hers, and she'd use it to rebuild the 4-blade sect. She charged again. She was fast, faster than me. Running wasn't an option. I narrowed my eyes and gripped my sword. Then come. I recognized her opening stance. Deathly 4 slashes, the same technique I'd used to kill her people. But she was postnatal, so I couldn't match her in raw power. I switched to the silk weaving blade, a postnatal level technique designed for entangling opponents. It was the natural counter to the deathly 4 slashes aggressive rushdown style. Our blades clashed. Even with the right technique, the impact nearly ripped the sword from my hands. Postnatal internal force was no joke. She pressed forward with the second strike aimed at my throat. I switched hands and deflected upward, but the force pushed me back half a step. She exploited that half step instantly. The third slash drove straight at my chest. I couldn't dodge it, so I used 1,000-pound drop, sinking my entire body weight downward while holding my blade flat across my body as a shield. Her sword struck the flat of my blade and sparked. At the same time, the grounding force from 1,000-pound drop locked my feet to the stone, and I snapped my torso back upright. The rebound flung her backward through the air. That was my one chance. I launched into smoke steps at full sprint. She twisted in midair and landed on her feet, but couldn't find me. I'd already circled behind her using phantom steps. She sensed the wind at her back and spun with a blind reverse slash. It missed. I was already past her, sliding from behind to her front in one ghostly movement. By the time she understood what had happened, my blade had already drawn a line across her throat. She pressed her hand to her neck, blood pouring between her fingers. She stared at me with disbelief and whispered, "Phantom steps," before collapsing backward. I let out a long breath. That reverse slash had almost caught me. If I'd been a fraction slower switching from behind to her front, I'd be the one bleeding out. I glanced around. Every fighter nearby was staring. I spotted Elder Qin standing at the edge of the stone beach and walked toward him quickly. Behind me, the crowd erupted. People couldn't believe a body-tempering fighter had killed a postnatal warrior. They'd counted at least 5 different techniques I'd used in one fight. Silk weaving blade, smoke steps, 1,000-pound drop, phantom steps, deathly 4 slashes. Some guessed I was from a major family. Others said I'd crush Martial Academy students. Nobody could figure out where I'd come from. When I reached Elder Qin, I asked if we should leave before the camp guards came after me for killing people. He laughed and said the Rift world had no such rules. Life and death were settled between individuals. Nobody cared as long as you weren't on a killing spree. Then he paused and said we did need to leave, but not because of the killings. He said first-tier beasts were no longer a challenge for me. I'd just killed a postnatal warrior. Staying here grinding weak monsters was pointless. If I wanted to grow, I needed to face real danger. I'm taking you to the canyon, he said. Second-tier beasts. I hesitated. Not out of fear, I was worried about my Demon Slayer registration. I'd signed up yesterday as an ordinary person. Showing up at the canyon killing second-tier beasts might raise questions. Elder Chin waved it off. Plenty of people registered with fake cultivation levels. The Demon Slayers didn't care about your realm. They only cared about results. I followed him up the slope toward the car. The canyon was a different world from the riverbank. The fighting here was brutal. Second-tier beasts could kill a postnatal warrior in a single blow if they dropped their guard. Everyone down here was at least minor achievement postnatal. This time, the steep slope didn't stop me. I used smoke steps and glided down like mist. At the bottom, I looked out at the massive horde of monsters and asked Elder Chin if there were any third-tier beasts mixed in. He shook his head. Third-tier beasts lived beyond the canyon, out past the desert. They'd developed chi, like innate-level warriors, and possessed real intelligence. Even at his level, venturing into that desert was risking death. The few major achievement innate warriors in Haicheng were all clan leaders who had plenty of resources and no reason to go. So the desert remained largely untouched, even though it was rich with spiritual herbs worth far more than beast corpses. He explained the point system in terms I could understand. 1 point was roughly equal to 10,000 Federation dollars. But points were worth far more in practice, because they could buy cultivation resources that money couldn't. I asked what would happen once all the beasts here were killed. He laughed. What I saw in the canyon and at the riverbank was nothing, a tiny fraction of the Rift World's population. The monsters weren't naturally gathered here. Grandmaster-level warriors deliberately lured batches of beasts to these controlled locations so human fighters could train. Every time the area was cleared, someone collected the corpses and fresh monsters were drawn in. The Rift World was teeming with beasts, each species controlling its own territory across a vast landscape. I asked why the Grandmasters didn't just kill all the low-level beasts themselves and collect the resources. Elder Chin's answer changed how I thought about everything. He said the Federation wasn't just gathering resources, it was building an army. If powerful monsters ever invaded Blue Star in force, warriors raised on free handouts wouldn't have the combat experience to fight back. Greenhouse flowers couldn't survive storms. The entire Demon Slayer system existed to forge real fighters through real battle. Blue Star had over 10 billion people and no shortage of talent. What it lacked were warriors who'd actually killed. The Grandmasters had an even deeper plan. Eventually, they wanted to push into the Rift World's interior. But that required warriors with genuine combat power, and it probably couldn't happen until someone broke through beyond the Grandmaster realm. I was absorbing all of this when Elder Chin suddenly grabbed my arm and pulled me back. His eyes were fixed on a group of people standing at the top of the slope. "Go warn your second master," he whispered. "The Zhang family is here. Tell him to leave immediately. Be careful yourself." My blood went cold. I sprinted into the canyon using swimming dragon steps, weaving through the chaos of beasts and fighters until I found Hu Lianfeng battling an armored boar. When he saw me alone, he was confused. I told him what Elder Chin had said. The Zhang family was here. He looked up at the slope and his face hardened. "Zhang Jianya," he muttered. "I don't see Zhang Yuanlin. Looks like Zhang Jianya brought his people for rift training." He stared at the old man leading the group at the top of the slope, the major achievement innate warrior who'd killed his family and sent Elder Chin to prison. Then he looked at me and said quietly, "I need to go." I nodded. He slipped into the crowd of fighters and monsters, heading away from the slope, disappearing into the darkness on the far side of the canyon. After Hu Lianfeng disappeared into the crowd, I circled back to the slope where Elder Chin was standing. The Zhang family group had already come down. Their leader, an old man, walked straight up to Elder Chin. "Qin Tianlong, long time no see. How's prison life? I hear you'll be out in 2 or 3 years." Zhang Jianya spoke with a mocking smile. Elder Chin's face stayed blank. He just said, "Thanks to you, it's been fine." Zhang Jianya acted friendly, calling them old friends, then turned to the crowd of young Zhang family members behind him and loudly introduced. Elder Qin as the former leader of the Green Dragon Gang, emphasizing former, since the gang was long gone. The young people greeted Elder Qin in unison, some of them laughing afterward. Elder Qin didn't flinch. He warned Zhang Jianye not to celebrate too early. When he got out, there would be a reckoning. Zhang Jianye scoffed and hinted that he was close to reaching peak innate, that Elder Qin's minor achievement innate wouldn't be enough anymore. Elder Qin fired back. 10 years have passed. How do you know I'm still at minor achievement? That shook Zhang Jianye. I could see it in his face. He'd beaten Elder Qin years ago only because of a higher realm, and even then it had been a close fight. If Elder Qin had reached major achievement innate, matching his level, Zhang Jianye knew he'd probably lose. He had the Zhang family's younger generation behind him, and if a real fight broke out, Elder Qin could slaughter them. He held himself back. Then Zhang Jianye said something that changed everything. He told Elder Qin not to assume the Zhang family had destroyed the Green Dragon Gang alone. He asked why none of Elder Qin's old subordinates, his 4 protectors and 8 commanders, all powerful warriors, had ever visited him in prison. Were they dead, or were they afraid? Elder Qin's composure cracked for the first time. He demanded to know what Zhang Jianye meant. Zhang Jianye just laughed and said Elder Qin would find out after he was released. As he walked past, he whispered 6 words, Magic City. The Liu family's young master. Elder Qin went pale. I'd never seen him look like that, like something had broken inside him. He stood staring at nothing, murmuring, Magic City. The Liu family. I walked up to him and asked what was wrong. He looked at me, and for a moment I saw something shift in his eyes, despair being replaced by something else. He told me to train harder in the coming days. I said I'd been training hard all along and asked what had happened. He said the vendetta against the Zhang family was more complicated than we'd thought. It wasn't just about Zhang Jianye. I glanced at Zhang Jianye standing at the canyon's edge, supervising his family's training. I told Elder Qin it didn't matter what realm Zhang Jianye was at. Even peak innate, I was confident I could kill him within 2 years. I meant it. The system gave me that certainty. Elder Qin shook his head. The problem wasn't the Zhang family itself. It was who stood behind them. The Liu family of Magic City. They had twin brothers, both at the Grandmaster realm, one at entry, one at minor achievement. Together, they could fight a major achievement Grandmaster. After 10 years, they might have grown even stronger. If both had advanced, their combined power could rival a peak Grandmaster. He reminded me that there were barely any Grandmasters in the entire world. Those at peak Grandmaster could be counted on one hand. The Green Dragon Gang hadn't fallen to the Zhang family alone. Those mysterious experts who'd appeared out of nowhere during the attack, they'd come from the Liu family. It had all started with a minor conflict between Elder Qin and a young man from the Liu family years ago. Elder Qin had never imagined something so small would lead to such devastating retaliation. Now I understood the weight on his shoulders. This wasn't just a local grudge anymore. It reached all the way to a family with Grandmaster-level protectors. My enemy list kept growing. The Yi family, the Li family, the Zhang family, and now the Liu family, a top-tier martial clan from Magic City with twin Grandmaster brothers. I'd be lying if I said there was no pressure. Elder Qin told me not to worry too much. If I reached the Grandmaster realm, the Liu family wouldn't necessarily go to war over the Zhang family for the sake of an old grudge. He said he believed in my talent. It was just a matter of time. He and Hu Lianfeng could wait 3 years, 5 years, even 10. He put his hand on my shoulder and sighed. I probably can't get revenge on my own anymore. It's all up to you. I told him that a master is like a father for life, and I would settle his debts. His eyes turned red when I said that. Without me, he truly had no hope. The Green Dragon Gang was gone. He couldn't take on the Zhang family alone, let alone the Liu family. He said we should leave the canyon since Zhang Jianye had seen me with him. He worried Zhang Jianye might target me. I agreed. I'd already tested my combat ability and confirmed that the system's auto-train skills worked just as well as years of personal practice. What I needed now was to keep raising my cultivation. We met Hu Lianfeng at the prison gates. Elder Qin told him about Zhang Jianye's visit, including the offer to spare Elder Qin if he killed Hu Lianfeng. Hu Lianfeng just laughed coldly. He said the only reason Zhang Jianye hadn't sent assassins into the prison was because the Demon Slayer system was protected by Grandmaster-level warriors. Elder Qin suspected Zhang Jianye's visit wasn't just about intimidation. Bringing that many family members to the rift meant something bigger was happening. Probably a new demon slayer policy that Zhang Jianya had learned about in advance. Back in the cell, I trained through the night while the other two talked. By 2 in the morning, I broke through to peak body tempering. I needed 40,000 more realm experience to reach postnatal entry. At 32 points per minute from both techniques combined, that was about 20 hours away. I kept drilling every technique until 6 in the morning, when I finally finished running each one 100 times. All 21 martial skills were now training at 1,280 proficiency per minute. Body tempering skills would reach perfection in 14 hours. Postnatal skills in 5 days. The innate level Overlord Spear in about 6 weeks. I'd just lain down to rest when Zhang Hanquang burst through the door looking panicked. Something big happened. Hu Lianfeng sat up and told him to spit it out. Zhang Hanquang said 2 Grandmaster warriors had discovered a massive field of spirit rhinoceros grass in the desert beyond the canyon. In 7 days, the demon slayers were organizing an expedition to harvest it, with Grandmaster level protection. Each stalk harvested was worth 100 points. The minimum requirement to join postnatal realm. Hu Lianfeng immediately understood why Zhang Jianya had brought so many family members to the rift. Spirit rhinoceros grass was the key ingredient for spirit rhinoceros pills, medicine that temporarily enhanced comprehension of techniques and skills. A single pill sold for 1,000 points and was nearly impossible to buy even at that price. I asked about the pills, but lost interest quickly. Enhanced technique comprehension? My system already handled that automatically. The pills were useless to me. Then Elder Qin spoke up. You should go, Wu Dao. 50 stocks would clear your sentence entirely. After you're released, I'll arrange for you to meet someone who can help you deal with the Yi family and the Li family. That changed everything. I didn't care about the grass or the pills, but early release and a connection to fight my enemies? I was in. I nodded. Perfect timing. I'll reach the postnatal realm by tomorrow. All 3 of them went silent, staring at me with the same exhausted disbelief I'd gotten used to seeing on their faces. I slept through the day and ate another huge meat meal before heading out at 8 that evening. At the canyon, I noticed the Zhang family was nowhere to be seen. Elder Qin explained they'd only come to register as demon slayers and kill a few beasts for appearances. Their real purpose was the spirit rhinoceros grass expedition in a week. The points from hunting were pocket-changed to wealthy clan members who had easy access to resources through martial academies. I pointed out the unfairness. People like us risked our lives in the rift while clan kids sat comfortably in academies, fed by resources we helped produce. Elder Qin sighed and agreed. That was the reality of Blue Star's martial world. The Demon Slayer organization was trying to change things, but the powerful families had deep connections everywhere, even among the Grandmasters. Breaking the cycle of clan monopoly would take time. He told me to stop worrying about politics and go kill monsters. I jumped off the slope. My smoke steps had reached major achievement. I could briefly hover in the air now, like the lightness techniques from old martial arts shows. All my body tempering skills had hit perfection, and my postnatal skills were at major achievement. Even the Overlord Spear had reached minor achievement. In 9 more days, every postnatal technique would be at perfection too. I charged into the beast horde with my broadsword, fearless. 20+ techniques at high levels gave me complete confidence. Swimming dragon steps for positioning, deathly 4 slashes for targeting weak points, 4 seasons blade for sustained combat. Even against second-tier beasts, I held my own easily. Weaker second-tier monsters died in a single strike. I was smart enough to avoid the top-tier ones like ground splitter beasts and diamond tigers. Those needed internal force to handle, which I didn't have yet. Elder Qin watched from nearby while hunting his own targets. He noted that I fought like someone far above my realm. 3 footwork styles and 3 blade arts working in seamless combination made me almost untouchable. He also noticed I never showed signs of fatigue. My auto-running techniques continuously repaired and strengthened my body even mid-battle. I was like a machine that never needed to stop. Other fighters in the canyon started noticing me too. They couldn't figure out who I was. Too young for this level of skill, too many techniques mastered to high levels, not wearing any clan insignia. They guessed I was some elite family's prodigy on a training trip. None of them would have believed I was a prisoner from the first prison, wearing civilian clothes instead of my uniform. a privilege only cell number 1 enjoyed. Around 4 in the morning, something shifted inside me. The system chimed. I knew immediately. I was breaking through to the postnatal realm. I pulled out of the fighting and rushed to the canyon wall. Elder Chin appeared beside me instantly to stand guard. I sat down cross-legged as energy surged from my dantian through my entire body. Understanding flooded my mind. The 4 stages of force that defined the postnatal realm. Inch force at entry, hidden force at minor achievement, neutralizing force at major achievement, and penetrating force at peak. Because the system trained everything automatically, it didn't feed me these skills one at a time. It gave me all 4 at once. I could already use peak-level penetrating force, even though my body was only at entry postnatal. The gap in physical strength meant I couldn't match a true peak postnatal fighter, but the knowledge and technique were already there. Another wave of body purification hit. The thickest layer of black toxins yet coated my skin. When it faded, I opened my eyes and felt the difference. My body was harder, my muscles sharper, my skin tighter. The body tempering phase was truly behind me. Every bone, muscle, and tendon had been forged to a new standard. The postnatal realm was about continuing to strengthen the body so it could handle the 4 types of force. And I was already ahead of schedule. Elder Chin told me to wash up at the river and test out my new postnatal abilities before we headed back. I found a fong-mouthed deer and punched it without using my sword. I channeled penetrating force through my fist, the highest level of postnatal force, the kind that passes through the body and destroys internal organs. One punch. Blood poured from its mouth, and it collapsed. But so did my arm. The pain was searing, muscles burning, joints aching. My body was only at entry postnatal, too weak to handle the strain of penetrating force. Then I had an idea. What if I pushed the force through my weapon instead of my body? I spotted a long-claw leopard and charged. This time, I transferred the penetrating force into the flat of my blade and slapped it across the leopard's back. The sword hummed as the energy flowed through it. The leopard coughed blood and crumpled. But the instant it fell, my steel broadsword shattered into pieces in my hand. I stared at the bare hilt, confused. Behind me, Elder Chin was frozen in shock. He whispered 2 words, penetrating force projection. He explained that what I'd done was something most postnatal warriors could never achieve. Even some innate fighters couldn't do it. Projecting penetrating force through a weapon required an incredibly deep understanding of how force moved through the body. Normally, fighters had to make physical contact to use penetrating force. Projecting it through a weapon gave you reach and protection, like fighting with a sword against someone using bare fists. With this technique, I could defeat any postnatal warrior who hadn't mastered it, which was almost all of them. He said penetrating force projection was essentially half-step innate. The innate realm was about projecting chi outside the body for ranged attacks. An entry innate fighter could project about 10 meters. If I used a 5-meter spear to project penetrating force, I was already halfway there. The sword had shattered because my entry postnatal body now had 10,000 kilograms of force, the power of a small excavator. Channeling penetrating force meant every point of the blade had to withstand that full load. Regular steel couldn't survive it. Next time, I'd need a meteorite iron weapon. We headed back to prison. Over the next 2 days, I followed the same routine. Rest during the day, hunt at night. My weapon changed from a broadsword to a black meteorite iron spear. With penetrating force projection flowing through a long weapon, I was devastating in the beast horde. On the 2nd day, I broke through to minor achievement postnatal. My strength jumped to 20,000 kilograms. At the same time, both the Northern Darkness Divine Art and the Limitless Art reached perfection, their maximum level. I knew what came next. It was time to fuse them using the Primordial Chaos Art. I felt a spark of excitement. If the fuse technique broke past the 160 per minute training speed cap, it would mean the new art could grow beyond the Grandmaster ceiling. Nobody on Blue Star had ever done that. If I could be the first to reach beyond Grandmaster, I'd be making history, the first person in over 100 years of the martial era to break that barrier. Back in the cell at 7 in the morning, I opened my system panel. Both the Northern Darkness Divine Art and the Limitless Art showed a symbol next to them. I tapped it. 2 fusible techniques detected. Proceed with fusion, I confirmed. A flood of information from both techniques crashed into my brain simultaneously. It felt like my skull was going to split open. The The pain lasted exactly 3 seconds, then vanished. The system asked me to name the new technique. I called it the Northern Darkness Limitless Art. 3 notifications followed. The system rewarded me with 10,000 proficiency for creating a new technique, which pushed it straight to entry level. It began auto-training at 320 proficiency per minute and 32 realm experience per minute. At first, I was disappointed. 320 per minute was just the combined total of both original techniques. The fusion hadn't added any bonus. But looking at the proficiency requirements, the new art was clearly a higher grade. Entry to minor achievement required 100,000 points, 10 times what either original technique needed at the same stage. I studied the technique's deeper principles and found something that made my heart race. The later sections repeatedly mentioned a concept called chi liquefaction. If I was reading it right, that was the breakthrough beyond the Grandmaster realm, the next stage that nobody on Blue Star had ever reached. It didn't match the Martial Dao Golden Core term Hu Lianfeng had mentioned, but it was pointing somewhere beyond everything currently known. I immediately started cultivating manually to test the ceiling. After 1 cycle, the speed doubled to 640 per minute. After 10 cycles, the same wall. Technique incomplete. Cannot increase further. The cap was 640 per minute. Better than before, but still limited. Then it hit me. I could still learn one more technique. Elder Qin had a cultivation art he hadn't taught me yet. If I raised it to perfection and fused it with the Northern Darkness Limitless art, the resulting technique might break even higher. The math worked. 10 days to bring the new fused art to perfection, 5 days to master Elder Qin's technique. After that, another fusion. I opened my eyes and asked Elder Qin to teach me his technique right away. All 3 masters sat up, electrified. Elder Qin asked if the fusion had worked. I told them yes. The new technique was called the Northern Darkness Limitless Art, and it contained references to chi liquefaction, which might be the path beyond Grandmaster. But I wouldn't know for certain until I reached that level myself. Zhang Hanquang immediately asked if they could learn the fuse technique. I shook my head. The art required 2 different types of chi running simultaneously, which meant you had to master the primordial chaos art first. Since nobody else could cultivate it, the fuse technique was mine alone. Zhang Hanquang looked deflated, but Elder Qin had expected this. He said he didn't mind. If he could personally train someone who broke past the Grandmaster ceiling, he'd die proud. He taught me his technique, the ocean-embracing art. Like the limitless art, it could reach major achievement Grandmaster. I activated it, ran 100 cultivation cycles, and pushed it to the same 160 per minute cap as every other incomplete technique. With both techniques running, I was earning 80 realm experience per minute. From minor achievement postnatal to major achievement would take under 2 days. Reaching peak postnatal would take about 5 days, right before the Spirit Rhinoceros Grass Expedition. The timing was perfect. I'd enter that desert at peak postnatal, strong enough to hold my own. I checked my system panel. All my body tempering skills were at perfection. Most postnatal skills were at perfection too. The only thing I couldn't figure out was whether martial skills could also be fused. I checked, but no symbol appeared next to any of them. The primordial chaos art only worked on cultivation techniques, not combat skills. I asked Elder Qin something that had been bothering me. Why did all our cultivation techniques seem incomplete while martial skills were perfectly whole? He smiled and said he'd been wondering when I'd ask. He explained 3 theories. The first was historical. Modern martial arts descended from ancient Dragon Nation practices. Thousands of years ago, emperors had deliberately altered cultivation techniques to weaken warriors and protect their thrones. They kept combat skills intact because soldiers needed fighting ability for war, but they stripped out the cultivation methods that would have made individuals too powerful to control. This explained why techniques survived but couldn't go past Grandmaster. Someone had edited out the higher stages. The second theory was simpler. Martial knowledge had been lost through a natural break in transmission. Supporters pointed out that even the most advanced combat skills only used chi. Nobody had ever created a skill that used the spiritual force of the Grandmaster realm. The highest skills were innate level, and the highest techniques reached Grandmaster. A clear gap. The third theory, mostly from Western researchers, claimed that Grandmaster was simply the natural ceiling and anything beyond was ancient speculation. Elder Chin said he'd half believed this until I fused my techniques. The theory fell apart against historical records showing that every few hundred years throughout Dragon Nation history, someone achieved what was called terrestrial immortal status, a level beyond Grandmaster. The most recent was Zhang Sanfeng, who supposedly created the Tai Chi lineage through a self-invented technique. Every one of these figures had mysteriously vanished, or ascended, after reaching that level. Based on what my system told me about techniques being incomplete and needing to be perfected, I privately leaned toward the first theory. Ancient emperors had altered techniques across all major sections. Some unaltered versions survived hidden among common people, which was why terrestrial immortals kept appearing throughout history. Over the next 5 days, I followed the routine, sleep by day, hunt by night. On day 2, I broke through to major achievement postnatal. Strength, 30,000 kilograms. On day 5, peak postnatal. 50,000 kilograms, 50 tons of force in a single punch. Combined with penetrating force projection, I could punch through 5 meters of reinforced concrete. The ocean-embracing art also reached perfection. I just needed 5 more days for the Northern Darkness Limitless art to max out before I could fuse again. On the 5th evening, we arrived at the Rift World an hour early. The Demon Slayer organization had opened access at 7 for the Spirit Rhinoceros Grass Expedition, led by Grandmaster-level warriors. The camp was packed, more people than I'd ever seen. Elder Chin estimated 80% were spectators, 10% were qualified harvesters, and the last 10% were hopefuls praying the entry requirements would be relaxed. He told me the martial world's breakdown: 80% body tempering, 15% postnatal, 5% innate. About 20-some grandmasters total across the planet. Elder Chin cleared a path through the crowd by releasing his innate chi, gently pushing people aside. We picked up my meteorite iron spear from the armory and headed to the parking area. That's when I saw them. The Zhang family was gathered near the front, and beside them, in a smaller group, I spotted a face that made my jaw clench. Yi Mingyuan, my half-brother, the one I was rotting in prison for. He shouldn't have been here. From what I knew of him, he hadn't reached the postnatal realm yet. I asked Elder Chin if family members had some kind of exemption from the cultivation requirement. He said he wasn't sure. The Demon Slayer commander overseeing Haiching's rift hadn't arrived yet, and the specific rules hadn't been announced. But he suspected the major families had negotiated special privileges. Elder Chin asked if I'd seen Yi Zhinshan among the crowd. I hadn't. Hu Lianfeng explained that Yi Zhinshan had terrible martial talent. His father Yi Haipeng had poured resources into him just to reach minor achievement body tempering. Yi Zhinshan stuck to managing the family business and never came to the rift. But Hu Lianfeng spotted Yi Haipeng at the front of the Yi family's group. He grinned at me. Want to settle your grudge today? Elder Chin shut him down immediately. A grandmaster was leading this expedition, so no personal vendettas. Besides, Zhang Jianya would pounce on any excuse to attack Hu Lianfeng. Hu Lianfeng chuckled and said he was joking, then added that at my current level, Yi Haipeng wouldn't even be a challenge. He wondered out loud what Yi Haipeng's face would look like if he knew his worthless son had pushed a martial prodigy out of the family. Elder Chin just smiled. He knew my combat ability firsthand. We'd sparred that afternoon after I'd broken through to peak postnatal. The result? A draw. Without weapons, using only my 20-plus perfection level techniques in combination, I traded over 100 moves with a minor achievement innate warrior. He could only keep me at bay by using his innate chi at critical moments. My ability to spot weaknesses while leaving none of my own made me nearly impossible to attack. He'd felt like he was hitting an iron wall. The moment he moved, I'd strike his opening before he could strike mine. He figured that with my meteorite iron spear, I could probably beat an entry innate fighter outright. Against someone at his own level, minor achievement innate, it was genuinely uncertain. We kept our distance from the family groups, especially the Zhang clan. Even though today's Grandmaster escort meant Zhang Jianya couldn't cause trouble, there was no point taking risks. I also wanted to stay hidden. I planned to dismantle the Yi family and Li family methodically after my release, not tip them off now. At 7:20, a black figure streaked across the sky overhead. I looked up in awe, someone flying on chi alone. That was the hallmark of a Grandmaster. The figure hovered above the parking area and turned around. Black hair, white eyebrows, youthful skin on what had to be an ancient body. He carried a black longsword. Something about him felt contradictory. The weight of centuries and the energy of youth existing in the same person. Elder Qin recognized him instantly. Wang Pingwen, nicknamed the white-browed ageless elder. He'd known Elder Qin's father 15 years ago, when he was still at Pekinate. He'd broken through to Grandmaster about 10 years ago. Despite being over 140 years old, he looked barely middle-aged. Grandmaster-level warriors could live past 300, and the breakthrough itself reversed aging dramatically. Since he had a connection to Elder Qin's father, that was good news. If Zhang Jianye tried anything, Wang Pingwen probably wouldn't take his side. Wang Pingwen spoke a single word, "Depart," and though his voice was soft, it reached every person present. Then he turned and flew toward the canyon. There was no announcement about cultivation requirements. No restriction. Everyone just started running. I quickly realized what was happening. Wang Pingwen kept accelerating. Within minutes, body-tempering warriors started falling behind. Then even some at major achievement body tempering couldn't keep up. I whispered to Elder Qin, "This isn't an open invitation. He's using speed as a filter." Elder Qin agreed. By the time we passed the canyon's perimeter, over 10,000 people had been whittled down to about 1,000, almost all postnatal or above. The only body-tempering fighters still running were important family heirs being physically dragged along by their innate-level elders. So the big families did get a privilege, just a subtle one. Their kids got carried. Meanwhile, independent fighters either kept up on their own strength or got left behind. Nobody could complain about unfairness when the rule was simply, keep up if you can, but the result was the same. Clan kids who couldn't qualify on merit still got in through family power. I understood the game now. Fair on the surface, rigged underneath. That was how this world worked. Half an hour of running through scorching sand brought us to a desert oasis. Even at night, the sand radiated heat. Elder Qin said something underground was constantly releasing warmth. He warned Hu Lianfeng and Zhang Hanquang to be extra careful. Third-tier beasts here could use qi for ranged attacks. He didn't warn me. After our sparring match that afternoon, he knew my combat ability was close to his own. That sparring match was something only the four of us knew about. We'd fought over 100 exchanges without weapons. He could only keep me at bay with his innate qi. My 20-plus perfection-level techniques made me a fortress. I could see every opening he left while leaving none of my own. Afterward, Zhang Hanquang had wanted to test me too. I dropped him with one punch. His peak postnatal couldn't even track my perfection-level phantom steps. Wang Pingwen led us to a small lake in the oasis and hovered above it. He released an enormous burst of qi and slammed a palm strike into the water. The lake exploded upward, then a massive whirlpool formed, draining the water away. Within minutes, the lake was empty, revealing a natural cave opening at the bottom. Elder Qin explained there'd been a formation, an ancient array that gathered spiritual energy and held the water above the cave. Wang Pingwen's strike had shattered it. Formations were lost knowledge on Blue Star. Elder Qin's father had studied them, understood the principles, but couldn't build one without special formation stones. Wang Pingwen shouted that we had 3 minutes before the water reformed. He dove in first, followed by the family groups, then everyone else. Our group jumped in last. The cave was enormous and not as dark as I'd expected. The ground was covered with glowing blue grass, spirit rhinoceros grass, everywhere, more than I could count. Wang Pingwen gave instructions. Harvest carefully. The medicine was in the roots. Damaged roots were worthless, and anyone who ruined too many plants would be thrown out. Elder Qin told us to split up and collect as much as possible, prioritizing my share so I could clear my sentence. I told him I'd already earned over 2,000 points from hunting beasts and only needed 30 more stalks. He told me not to worry about it and just focus on harvesting. The work was painfully delicate. Each stalk took about 5 minutes of careful digging. In 1 hour, I got 10 intact ones and broke 2. I sat down to rest my concentration. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "You Wu Dao?" I turned around. Yi Mingyuan, my half-brother, the reason I was in prison, stood there staring at me with cold surprise. He asked how a nobody like me had gotten in here. Elder Qin appeared at my side and told him flatly, "I brought him." "Do you have a problem with that?" Yi Mingyuan's face shifted. He sensed the danger in Elder Qin's tone and immediately shouted for his grandfather. Yi Haiping looked over, saw Elder Qin, and his expression tightened. He walked over quickly and greeted Elder Qin with a polite bow, calling him Brother Tianlong. Elder Qin cut him down immediately. Are we close? Your father had to call me Elder Qin when he was alive. You think you can address me as an equal? Know your place. Yi Haiping fumbled and corrected himself to Uncle Tianlong. He asked Elder Qin to forgive whatever his grandson had done for the Yi family's sake. Elder Qin scoffed. Your family has no face with me. Even your father, dead for decades, wouldn't have face with me. Your grandson provoked my disciple, and you think asking nicely will make me let it go? Yi Haiping stood there awkwardly. The Yi family was a major clan, but they'd always been below the Green Dragon Gang's level. Even with the gang destroyed, Yi Haiping had no standing to push back against Qin Tianlong. Then a mocking voice came from behind Yi Haiping. Well, if it isn't the great Green Dragon Gang leader, Qin Tianlong. A prisoner bullying major families now? Pulling rank with seniority. Aren't you embarrassed? And you, Yi Haiping, your family is 7th in Haiqing. Why are you cowering before him? Zhang Jianya stepped out from behind Yi Haiping, smiling. Zhang Jianya stepped in to back up Yi Haiping, talking about the great friendship between the Zhang and Yi families. Then he looked at me and sneered. He called me a bastard, said my bloodline wasn't pure. Something inside me snapped. I shouted back at him. Say that again, old mutt. Motherless dog with no father to teach him manners. Elder Qin grabbed my shoulder, but didn't stop me. He just grinned and said, Wu Dao, you're too honest. Telling the truth like that isn't polite. Zhang Jianya's face twisted with fury. He drew a long staff from his back and challenged Elder Qin directly. Elder Qin called for his spear. Zhang Hanquang threw the black meteorite iron spear across the cave, and Elder Qin caught it midair. Both men took their stances. Before either could strike, a voice cut through from above. Are you two quite finished? Wang Pingwen hovered overhead, visibly annoyed. He said he brought everyone here to harvest grass, not settle grudges. Zhang Jianya pushed back, demanding I be punished. Wang Pingwen told him flatly not to test his patience. Elder Qin lowered his weapon and addressed Wang Pingwen respectfully. Uncle Wang. They exchanged a few words about Elder Qin's father, who had apparently been close to breaking through to Grandmaster before dying from accumulated injuries. Wang Pingwen sighed about how fate had treated the Qin family. Zhang Jianya watched this exchange and tried a different approach. He played his trump card, the Liu family. He told Wang Pingwen that Liu Xiaobai was close to reaching minor achievement Grandmaster, and that his own great-granddaughter was about to marry into the Liu family. He suggested that Wang Pingwen, as a mere entry Grandmaster, couldn't afford to offend the Liu clan. The cave went dead silent. Everyone watched to see if Zhang Jianya had just signed his own death warrant. Wang Pingwen's eyes narrowed. He smiled coldly and said, Try me. See if I dare kill you. Zhang Jianya froze. He'd expected Wang Pingwen to back down, or at least step aside. Instead, the Grandmaster had called his bluff completely. Zhang Jianya couldn't figure out whether Wang Pingwen had a hidden backer of his own or simply didn't fear the Liu family. After a long silence, Zhang Jianya pulled back. He threw one last threat at Elder Qin, said he shouldn't think prison would protect him forever, and walked away. Meanwhile, off to the side, I'd overheard Yi Haiping and Yi Mingyuan talking. Yi Haiping had recognized Elder Qin's strength and warned Yi Mingyuan that Elder Qin's injuries had healed and he might have grown stronger. Yi Mingyuan called me a lucky bastard for finding a powerful master in prison. But Yi Haiping dismissed any threat from Elder Qin, saying Zhang Jianya would deal with him after his release. After Zhang Jianya left, Elder Qin thanked Wang Pingwen. Wang Pingwen sighed and warned him. He could protect Elder Qin today, but not forever. Once Liu Xiaobai broke through to minor achievement Grandmaster, Zhang Jianya might genuinely dare to attack the first prison. Elder Qin nodded gravely and thanked him again. Wang Pingwen flew back up to resume patrolling the cave, and we went back to harvesting. After Wang Pingwen left, I asked Elder Qin quietly whether the two of us together could beat Zhang Jianya. He shook his head. The gap between minor achievement innate and major achievement innate was huge. Double the chi reserves, double the attack range. We might manage a stalemate, but killing him would be nearly impossible. And even if we could, the Liu family's twin grandmasters stood behind him. If Liu Xiaobai truly reached minor achievement grandmaster, the twins together could rival a peak grandmaster. We couldn't afford to expose my abilities prematurely. Elder Qin told me to stop coming to the Rift world after today. He'd use his points to buy every technique and cultivation art available from the Demon Slayer exchange system. I'd train inside the prison while he stood guard. Once I reached major achievement in 8, I'd go to the desert to hunt third-tier beasts and push for Gold Demon Slayer rank, a title that would open many doors. He said our time was running short. The harvesting took 5 hours. I collected 60 stalks, 6,000 points. My 3 masters gave me everything they'd picked too. Another 170 stalks, 17,000 points. Combined with my beast hunting earnings, my total reached over 25,000. I officially qualified for Bronze Demon Slayer rank, though I didn't bother swapping the badge. Back at the cell, Elder Qin handed me over a dozen postnatal combat techniques and 2 cultivation arts that could reach major achievement grandmaster, everything the Demon Slayer exchange had to offer. 4 days later, while practicing the Overlord spear, the system chimed. I'd broken through to entry in 8. The breakthrough was violent. My chi compressed inside the dantian, spinning faster and faster until something new was born. Innate chi, denser and more powerful than anything before. It tore through my meridians, doubling their width. Black toxins poured out of my skin in the thickest layer yet. When it settled, I raised my hand. A wisp of white chi materialized above my palm. Elder Qin's eyes lit up. Try controlling it with penetrating force. I flicked my wrist. The chi shot into the ground like a bullet, boring a fist-sized hole of unknown depth into the stone floor. Then he explained something more advanced. Since innate chi could leave the body, I could combine it with penetrating force projection through a weapon. The technique was called double penetrating force. Attach chi to the weapon, transmit penetrating force through the weapon into the chi, then launch the chi itself. It was exponentially more powerful than either technique alone, but incredibly difficult. His own father had only managed it successfully 1 time out of 10 before dying. I picked up my spear, coated it with innate chi, channeled penetrating force through the shaft and into the chi, then released it. The chi blasted off the spearhead and punched a bowl-sized crater into the ground. First try. Perfect execution. Elder Qin stared at the hole, then at me, then back at the hole. His mouth hung open. He'd spent his entire life trying to master double penetrating force and never succeeded. His father, a near grandmaster, had barely managed it. I'd done it on my first attempt. He asked me to do it again. I did. Another perfect hole. Something broke inside him. I could see it in his eyes, a lifetime of pride in his own talent, shattered. He'd been called a genius his entire 100-year career. But watching me casually perform a technique that eluded even grandmasters made all of that feel meaningless. I asked if he wanted to spar. He refused immediately. With innate chi and double penetrating force, 1 hit from me could shatter his old bones. He told me to keep practicing the Overlord spear. Once it reached perfection and combined with double penetrating force, even peak innate warriors wouldn't stand a chance. I nodded, slightly disappointed. I'd gotten so strong that I couldn't even find a sparring partner anymore. A thought struck me while holding my practice spear. What if I didn't start the penetrating force at the weapon? What if I started it in my body, pushed it through the weapon, and then into the chi on the spearhead? 3 layers of penetrating force instead of 2. Back when I first reached postnatal, my body couldn't handle the strain. But now at innate level, my body was strong enough. Elder Qin paused. He'd never considered that approach. He told me to try it carefully. My first attempt shattered the wooden practice spear. It couldn't handle the double-layered force passing through it. Elder Qin left and came back 3 minutes later carrying a pitch-black spear, his family's ancestral weapon, forged entirely from meteorite iron. It was heavier, colder, and far stronger than anything the Demon Slayers stocked. I tried again. This time the spear held firm. No vibration, no sound. But the chi on the spearhead scattered the instant the triple force touched it. The problem wasn't the weapon. It was the chi itself. Innate chi wasn't dense enough to withstand 3 layers of penetrating force. Adding more chi didn't help either. It wasn't a quantity issue, it was strength. Elder Qin confirmed that innate chi had a fixed density regardless of your realm level. The only thing that changed with advancement was how much chi you had. Then I remembered how innate chi was born, by compressing postnatal chi in a spinning vortex inside the dantian. What if I did the same thing externally? Spin and compress the innate chi on the spearhead until it became something denser? I started rotating the chi at the spear tip, using the outer layer to compress the inner core. The white chi slowly turned transparent. Elder Chin watched with wide eyes and warned me to be careful. He could tell the energy was transforming into something beyond normal chi. He whispered that it looked like the chi liquefaction I'd mentioned. The spear began to tremble. The compressed chi was pushing past what even meteorite iron could contain. I couldn't wait any longer. I fired all 3 layers of penetrating force, body to spear, spear to chi, chi outward. A white streak of light shot from the spearhead and punched into the concrete floor. The explosion shook the entire cell. Where it hit, there was now a basin-sized hole, 10 meters deep, drilled straight through solid concrete. Triple penetrating force. It worked. Elder Chin stood frozen, muttering to himself. He said even a normal Grandmaster might not produce that kind of destructive power. Grandmasters used the same innate chi as everyone else. They just had more of it and could control it with spiritual force. But what I'd compressed on that spearhead had clearly surpassed innate chi entirely. He asked me if I'd felt the chi approaching liquefaction. I told him yes. It had been right on the edge of transforming, but I'd stopped because the spear was shaking and I didn't want to destroy his family heirloom. The downside was time. Compressing chi like that took too long for regular combat. It was a finishing move, devastating but slow to prepare. Elder Chin rolled his eyes when I complained about the limitations. He reminded me that he hadn't even mastered double penetrating force, and here I was worrying that triple wasn't convenient enough. Then he took the spear from me. Watching my method had given him an idea. By using the spear shaft as a relay point for the force, he could bypass the difficult chi projection step and achieve his own version of double penetrating force. He tried it and succeeded. Though his version only worked at close range, the force would only transfer when the spearhead physically touched the target. Still, for a man who'd been chasing this technique his entire life, it was a breakthrough. He looked at the spear, then at me, and shook his head with a weary smile. Even while teaching me, he'd ended up learning from me instead. The next afternoon, the system chimed. The Northern Darkness limitless art had reached perfection. The familiar symbol appeared. I fused it with the ocean-embracing art immediately. This time there was no pain. The information merged in 1 second. I named the new technique the Myriad Fusion Art. Simple and practical, since I'd be fusing more techniques into it over time and didn't want a name that kept getting longer. The system rewarded 30,000 starting proficiency, pushing it straight to entry level. Auto-training speed, 800 per minute. After 1 manual cultivation cycle, it doubled to 1,600. After 10 cycles, it hit the same wall. Technique incomplete. The cap was 1,600 per minute. I studied the new art's principles. No new realm had appeared. It still described chi liquefaction as the path forward, just with more detail and efficiency than before. I'd spotted the pattern. A new realm only appeared when the starting proficiency crossed a 10-fold threshold. The Myriad Fusion Art started at 30,000. I needed 100,000 to unlock the next stage. Each fusion of a Grandmaster-level technique added roughly 20,000. I had 2 more techniques from the Demon Slayer exchange. That would bring me to 70,000. Still 30,000 short. I told Elder Chin I needed more techniques. He said there were only about a dozen arts on Blue Star that reached Major Achievement Grandmaster. The Demon Slayer system only had 3. The rest were held by major sects and martial academies. He'd try to get more brought in, but it would take time. Then Hu Lianfeng sat up from his bed and said quietly, "Actually, I have one, and it can go beyond Grandmaster." The cell went silent. Elder Chin looked at him. "You mean the carefree art?" Hu Lianfeng nodded. Zhang Hanquang exploded. "You've been sitting on that this whole time?" Hu Lianfeng snapped back that it was the carefree sect's sacred inheritance technique. He'd never have revealed it if I didn't need it. Zhang Hanquang said the carefree sect had been destroyed decades ago, wiped out precisely because they possessed the carefree art, which was rumored to break past Grandmaster. Ironically, the sect had never produced a single innate warrior. The breakaway Northern Darkness sect, using the Northern Darkness divine art, had done better. Hu Lianfeng explained. His master had been the carefree sect's technique elder. Knowing the art would bring disaster, his master had secretly passed it to Hu Lianfeng, an unofficial disciple. instead of the senior students. But the technique was genuinely strange. It worked fine up to peak postnatal, then simply stopped progressing. His master suspected the version they had was incomplete, but nobody could figure out what was missing. He looked at me and said if I wanted to learn it, I'd be inheriting the carefree sect's vendetta. The people who destroyed the sect were still out there. Then he sighed and waved his own condition away. The art was useless in his hands. If I could make it work, he'd have honored his master's memory. Come closer, he said. I'll whisper it to you. Hu Lianfeng whispered the carefree art into my ear. When he finished, I told him I'd memorized it. But looking at the system panel, something was wrong. The starting proficiency read, Carefree art, not learned, 0 tenths. Just 10 points to reach entry. That meant it could only take someone to the postnatal realm at best, 100 times weaker than the Northern Darkness divine art. I asked Hu Lianfeng if he was sure this could go beyond Grandmaster. He said he was only passing on what his master had given him. He admitted the Carefree sect had never produced a single innate warrior. Most members eventually switched to the Northern Darkness divine art and split off to form the Northern Darkness sect. I told him honestly, this technique felt like it maxed out at postnatal. He frowned and wondered aloud if it really had been altered. I started motivating the technique. Carefree art, the Northern Darkness divine art already reached perfection. You two come from the same lineage. Step it up. 1 stimulation, and the auto-training speed jumped straight to 160 per minute. That was impossible for a technique with only 10 starting proficiency. Something was happening. Then a cascade of system notifications hit me. The Carefree art was recognized as the continuation of the Northern Darkness divine art. It inherited all of the Northern Darkness divine art's accumulated bonuses. It instantly reached perfection. And because the Northern Darkness divine art had already been absorbed into the Myriad fusion art, the Carefree art automatically merged in two. The system asked me to name the new technique. I kept it as Myriad fusion art. The reward, 100,000 starting proficiency. The threshold I'd been trying to reach. A new tier had been unlocked. I closed my eyes and studied the new technique's principles. The Myriad fusion art was now built primarily around the Carefree art. Everything clicked. The Carefree art was never meant to be practiced alone. It was the second half of the Northern Darkness divine art. You had to master the Northern Darkness divine art to perfection first, reach minor achievement Grandmaster, and only then would the Carefree art function. That's why the Carefree sect had been stuck at postnatal for generations. They never completed the prerequisite. And buried in the new technique's deepest passages, I found it. Martial Tao Golden Core. Beyond Qi liquefaction lay condensation, turning liquid Qi into a solid core. The legendary realm that Hu Lianfeng had once mentioned as a rumor in an old text. I couldn't contain myself. Second Master. It's the Golden Core. It exists. Hu Lianfeng snapped out of his memories. What? The Carefree art reaches Golden Core. I shook my head. The Carefree art alone only reached the peak of the liquefaction realm. But fused with the limitless art and ocean-embracing art, my Myriad fusion art could go all the way to Golden Core. Hu Lianfeng realized the implication immediately. So the Northern Darkness divine art and the Carefree art were always one technique? I confirmed it. Elder Qin pieced together the history. The Carefree sect must have split their founder's original technique into 2 parts to protect it from being stolen whole. The person who did the splitting was remarkably skilled, making both halves independently functional. But even the complete original had been altered at some point. The Carefree art alone only reached the liquefaction realm, not Golden Core. My fused version went further because it incorporated other techniques too. Zhang Hanquang sidled up to Hu Lianfeng and asked to learn the Carefree art. Hu Lianfeng reminded him that it required mastering the Northern Darkness divine art first, which couldn't coexist with other techniques. Zhang Hanquang would have to abandon his entire cultivation and start over. He backed off immediately. Elder Qin pointed out the hard truth for all of them. Without the primordial chaos art enabling multi-technique cultivation, none of this was accessible. Their only hope was finding the continuation techniques that matched what they already practiced. Otherwise, Grandmaster was their ceiling. The auto-training speed of the new Myriad fusion art was 1,600 per minute, with 160 realm experience per minute. The path to Golden Core was open, and I was the only person on Blue Star who could walk it. Hu Lianfeng seemed lighter after learning the Carefree art could truly reach beyond Grandmaster. I asked him who destroyed the carefree sect. He shook his head. He didn't want to drag me into it. But Zhang Hanquang spoke up anyway. It was Li Chenghua and his myriad law sect. Who? Li Yinfeng snapped at him for saying it. But Zhang Hanquang pointed out the obvious. Given how fast I was growing, a peak grandmaster wouldn't be a threat forever. Elder Qin filled in the details. Li Chenghua was one of the very first martial artists from when spiritual energy returned to Blue Star over a century ago. He'd started training in his 30s and reached grandmaster by his 70s, an extraordinary pace for that resource-poor era. After reaching grandmaster, he founded the Myriad Law sect, whose entire purpose was collecting every martial technique in existence. They destroyed over 20 sects, the carefree sect among them. Li Chenghua also possessed a sinister technique called the Demon Cloud Palm, which led to rumors he was the heir of the Demon Gate, a 400-year-old evil sect that fed on weaker warriors' blood and cultivation. The Demon Gate had only been destroyed when Zhang Sanfeng, the last terrestrial immortal, appeared. Elder Qin said Li Chenghua's combat power ranked solidly in the top 3 on all of Blue Star. Until I reached peak grandmaster at minimum, I should never cross paths with him. I agreed. The carefree sect's vendetta would have to wait until I surpassed grandmaster entirely. Over the following days, I settled into a rhythm. Train the Overlord Spear during the day, hunt monsters at night. The new Myriad Fusion Art trained at 3,200 proficiency per minute after manual cultivation, but still hit the incomplete wall after 10 cycles. At that pace, reaching perfection would take 24 days. Day 2, minor achievement innate. Day 6, major achievement innate. Day 12, peak innate. On day 20, the system chimed. Grandmaster. The breakthrough was intense. Innate chi surged from my dantian straight into my brain. Pain exploded through my skull, then something cracked open. The upper dantian, the seat of consciousness. A wave of spiritual energy burst outward from my body, carrying innate chi with it. This was spiritual force, the power that defined grandmasters. It converted consciousness into an energy that could control chi externally. I pulled my chi back inside and extended my spiritual sense outward. It covered the entire cell, then the whole prison building. I could feel every person in every cell, their positions, their movements, though I couldn't see faces or details through concrete walls. This was the Grandmaster's greatest advantage, awareness of hidden dangers within range. My 3 masters woke up from the commotion. Hu Lianfeng stared at me in disbelief. Zhang Hanquang whispered that it had been barely a month since I first touched martial arts. Elder Qin confirmed what they were seeing, spiritual force projection, the unmistakable sign of the Grandmaster realm. My skin had changed again, smooth and luminous, like a newborn's. The toxin purge had been lighter this time, but the transformation was more profound. Elder Qin asked when I planned to leave prison. My points were more than enough to clear my sentence. But I'd learned about a privilege exclusive to Gold Demon Slayers, the authority to command the Demon Slayer garrison forces of whatever city they were in. That was the power I wanted. Not just strength, but institutional authority. I didn't want to simply kill my enemies. I wanted to crush them within the system, using rules they couldn't escape. I told Elder Qin I wasn't leaving yet. I'd wait until I reached Gold Demon Slayer rank, roughly 1,000,000 points. At Grandmaster level, I could hunt 3rd-tier beasts efficiently. 10 months should be enough. He nodded. It's your call. 10 months. Then I'd walk out of that iron gate and settle every debt I owed. Over the next months, I fused technique after technique into the Myriad Fusion Art. Every fusion raised the starting proficiency and training speed. For days after reaching Grandmaster, the first fusion. 12 days later, another. Elder Qin pulled every favor he had to get new cultivation arts smuggled into prison. One by one, I absorbed them all. The training efficiency eventually capped at 1/10 of the starting proficiency. The system told me I'd maxed out my technique's innate talent. But even capped, the numbers were staggering. After fusing a total of 10 techniques, the Myriad Fusion Art sat at 300,000 starting proficiency, training at 30,000 per minute with 3,000 realm experience per minute. My realm climbed steadily. Minor achievement Grandmaster on day 12. Major achievement on day 6 after that. Peak Grandmaster on day 12 more. Then, on the 20th day after reaching Grandmaster, the system chimed one more time. Beyond Grandmaster. the liquefaction realm. The breakthrough was the most painful yet. Every drop of innate chi in my body compressed into a spinning vortex inside my dantian. The cloud of chi became fog, the fog became mist, and then a single white droplet fell from the center of the vortex. Then another, and another. When it was over, my dantian held no more chi. Instead, there was a pool of white liquid, innate true liquid. It began circulating through my meridians, and the pain was beyond anything I'd experienced. It felt like my channels were being torn apart. But after each cycle, warmth flooded in and repaired everything, making the meridians wider and stronger. 10 cycles later, the liquid flowed smoothly with no pain at all. I clenched my fist. The air around it trembled. My strength had jumped to at least 1,000,000 kilograms, maybe more. When I channeled the liquid into the ancestral spear and fired triple penetrating force, the blast punched clean through a hillside, leaving a hole I could see daylight through. I stared at the result and had only one thought. This was beyond human. 1 month later, minor achievement liquefaction. 2 months after that, major achievement. My Demon Slayer points crossed 1,000,000. Gold rank. Somewhere far away, the 6 founding Grandmasters of the Demon Slayer organization held a video meeting about an 18-year-old who'd gone from ordinary person to Gold Demon Slayer in 7 months. They argued about whether I was real, studied my combat footage, debated whether I had the legendary sacred martial body. They wanted to summon me to headquarters, but were all too busy fighting monster surges during mating season. They agreed to wait a month. I didn't know about any of that. When I walked back into Cell No. 1 holding the gold badge, Elder Chin looked at me and asked quietly, "Ready to leave?" I nodded. He gave me an address and a name, Ghost 7. A contact who'd compile intelligence on all my enemies. If I wanted, Ghost 7 could also reassemble the scattered remnants of the Green Dragon Gang. Elder Chin told me not to rush the Zhang family. Wait until he got out so we could go together. And he warned me that despite my power, some modern weapons on Blue Star could still threaten my life. Hu Lianfeng smiled and told me to be careful out there. He didn't have much to add. Elder Chin had covered everything. Zhang Hanquang looked at me with quiet warmth. He said his own enemies were already dead. His only regret was his daughter, kidnapped by human traffickers before he went to prison. He'd never found her. He asked me to look for her if I could. If I found her, just bring her to visit him. If I couldn't, well, it had been over a year. He didn't know if she was still alive. He trailed off and shook his head. Forget it. Just be careful. I looked at my 3 masters, the men who'd taken a framed orphan with nothing and turned him into the strongest person on Blue Star. I bowed deeply. Thank you for everything. Once I've settled my debts, I'll come back and get all 3 of you out. Elder Chin said, "Go." "Be careful," Hu Lianfeng said. "Go. Don't look back. It's bad luck." Zhang Hanquang just smiled. I bowed one more time, opened the cell door, and walked toward the prison gate without turning around.